Imagine a world completely without light. No street lamps, no screens, no tiny glowing rectangles in your hand telling you what everyone ate for breakfast. Just the heavy, silent dark of a 6th century winter, pressing down on a small village like a thick blanket. And listen, because the first thing you notice isn't what you can see. It's what you can't hear. No engines, no distant traffic, no buzzing power lines, no hum of refrigerators, no notification sounds, just wind. Maybe rain, maybe the slow creak of wood, and somewhere in the dark, a tired horse shifting its weight, like it has all the time in the world. Because it does. The Dark Ages weren't just a gap in history. They were a time when the world moved at the speed of a tired horse, and news took seasons, not seconds, to travel. And tonight, I'm inviting you to leave the noise of the modern world behind. Close your eyes. Can you hear the rain on the thatched roof? Can you imagine that smell? Damp straw, cold smoke, wetter earth? Good, because we are going back to a time when doing absolutely nothing wasn't laziness. It was normal. It was survival. It was Tuesday. Now, here's the question that pulled you in. The title, What Was History's Biggest Cover-Up? Because you've probably heard the idea before, even if you didn't call it that. You've heard people say the Dark Ages were blank, like somebody took a big black marker and scribbled over a chunk of Europe's story. Like there's this missing part in the timeline where nothing happened. No big inventions, no great thinkers, no shining cities, just mud, misery, and people forgetting how to read. That's the popular picture, and it's a good picture, if you're trying to sell drama. But is it true? Or is that the real cover-up? Because sometimes the biggest cover-up isn't a secret meeting in a candlelit room. It's something simpler. It's a story told so many times that nobody checks it anymore. So let's do this gently. Let's take what you think you know and set it on the table just for a minute. Before you clicked this video, you may have believed the Dark Ages were a dead time, a boring time, a time when the world went backwards. And after tonight, you'll know something calmer and honestly more interesting. The darkness wasn't only about ignorance. It was also about silence and slow days and the way ordinary life can disappear from the history books like smoke slipping out of a roof. Because history loves kings and battles. History loves shiny objects. History loves big names. But most humans who ever lived were not kings. They were not famous. They were not written down. They were busy, quietly busy. And that quiet, repetitive, everyday life, that might be the real missing part. Not a conspiracy, just nobody bothered to write about it. So tonight we'll start with a mystery. And then we'll do something a little sneaky. A bait and switch. We'll hook your mind with the idea of a hidden cover-up. And then we'll slowly, softly, drift into the ultra-boring details of medieval peasant life. Because this is history for sleep. This is boring history. This is how you fall asleep to history, like bedtime stories for adults, but with more mud. A relaxing history documentary that doesn't try to wake you up. And if you're listening in bed right now, if your day was loud, if your mind is still running like a little hamster on a wheel, Let me say this clearly. You don't have to stay with me. You don't have to pay attention. You don't have to remember anything. You can just rest. If you miss a part, that's perfect. That means it worked, because the truth isn't a conspiracy. The truth is silence. It was a time when the world simply slowed down. Tonight, we will walk through that silence together, and we'll start where every good mystery starts. With a map, not the kind of map on your phone. No blue dot saying you are here, just a piece of parchment. A skin scraped thin, stretched, and dried. Lines drawn with ink that smells a little sharp. And the map is wrong. Not wrong like a mistake. Wrong like a guess. A coastline shaped like a bent spoon. A river that curves where it shouldn't. A place name spelled 3 different ways in the same paragraph. Because information is slow here. Everything is slow. And when information is slow, the world feels bigger, scarier, full of empty spaces where your imagination can hide monsters. Now, if you've ever watched a Dark Ages documentary, you've seen the usual trick. They show you a ruined stone wall in fog. They play low music. They say words like collapse, lost knowledge, barbarian, plague. And you feel it. You feel like the lights went out. But here's the contrarian thought. What if the lights didn't go out? What if the stage lights went out? What if it's not that nothing happened? It's that nobody brought a spotlight, because the Roman Empire, at least in the West, did fall apart. Roads broke, cities shrank, trade got thinner, and when the big machine of empire stops clanking, life doesn't end. Life just gets smaller, more local, more quiet. Instead of huge stone buildings, you get wooden halls. Instead of letters flying around an empire, you get messages carried by tired feet. Instead of marble statues, you get a good bowl, a warm fire, a roof that doesn't leak too badly. And yes, sometimes a roof that leaks anyway. Now, let's make this real. Picture a village, not a fantasy village, with cute cobblestones and cheerful music. A real one. A cluster of homes made from wood and mud. Thatched roofs like thick hats. Smoke rising in lazy strands because there's no chimney, just a hole. The ground is uneven. There are puddles. There is always mud. And when people say the Dark Ages were muddy, they're not being poetic. They mean mud. Real mud. Mud that grabs your shoes and doesn't want to let go. Mud that smells like wet earth and animals. Mud that gets on your hem, your hands, your tools, your life. If you had a job in this time, your job description was simple. 1. Do work. 2. Stay alive. And if you did that, you were doing great. Now listen again, because this is where the sleep begins to creep in. The soundscape. No machines, no factories, no planes, no sirens. You know what that means? The loudest thing in your world might be a goose, or a baby crying, or the wind, or a cartwheel complaining as it turns. Creak, creak. Even the sounds are tired. And at night, the darkness is not the darkness we know. We think we know darkness because we switch off the lights, but we still have street glow. We still have little LEDs. We still have a sky bruised by cities. Back then, night was a full creature, a heavy animal. It walked into your village and sat down, and it didn't leave until morning. The only light comes from a central fire, or a tallow candle. And a tallow candle isn't cute. It's made from animal fat. It smells a little honest. It flickers like it's unsure of itself. And when it goes out, the dark rushes back in like water. Now, if you're still awake, I want you to notice your own room. Even with your eyes closed, you can feel the difference. Your bed, your blanket, the steadiness of your breathing. Good. Let your shoulders drop. Let the day slide off you. Because we're going deeper now. We're leaving the big idea, the cover-up, and we're walking into the part history barely writes down. The daily life. The life in the Middle Ages that was mostly work. Simple work, slow work. Work that repeats until your brain gets bored enough to sleep. This is where history audiobook for sleep turns into a soft loop. This is where calm narration history becomes a gentle road. So let's follow one person. Not a king, not a knight, not a hero, just a peasant, a worker, a farmer, a human who has never heard the word productivity, because the sun decides productivity here. The season decides productivity. Your stomach decides productivity. And that's it. It's still dark when the day begins. Not early morning aesthetic dark. Real dark. The kind where you can't see your hand unless it crosses the firelight. You wake on straw bedding. It crackles softly when you move. Your joints feel stiff because everything is cold and damp. Your breath comes out white in the air. There's no thermostat. There is only the weather. And the weather does not care. Outside, there is a slow sound. An animal breathing. Oxen, big bodies, warm steam from their noses. They shift their weight with that patient heaviness that only a large animal has. Now, if you've ever seen an ox up close, you know the feeling. It's like standing next to a moving wall. Quad power, not in a rush, and that's perfect. Because the tool it pulls today is not some shiny metal machine. It's a simple plow, a scratch plow, an ard. It does not flip the soil neatly like modern plows. It scratches, it drags a line. It opens the earth just enough. Enough for seeds, enough for hope. You step outside, and the mud welcomes you. It's cold, it's thick. It sucks at your feet. Each step is a slow pull, like the ground is asking you to stay. You can smell damp earth. You can smell old smoke. You can smell animal life. And you walk to the field. Now here's a detail people skip because it sounds boring. But we love boring here. This is daily life in the Dark Ages. Fields weren't always planted all at once. A common pattern in many places was a two-field system. One field worked, one field resting. One year you plant one side, the next year you switch. It's not fancy, it's not optimized. It's just what works when you don't have modern fertilizer and you can't force the earth to give more than it can. And here's the weird comfort of it. The land rests. So do you, in a way. Not because you get vacation, no, but because the year has a rhythm, a loop, and humans love loops. Your mind loves loops too. That's why counting sheep works. That's why repetitive sounds feel safe. That's why this bland history is secretly powerful. So you set the oxen to work. The wooden frame creaks. The leather straps strain. The oxen lean forward. Slow, plod, plod. Their hooves press into the soft ground, and the plow scratches a line. You guided it, not with force, with patience. Because if you push too hard, you'll tire the animal. And if you tire the animal, You ruin the whole day, so you move at the animal's pace. Row by row, furrow by furrow, the sound is steady. Earth tearing softly, wood groaning. Breath, step, breath, step. If you're listening right now, let that rhythm slow you. Inhale, exhale, row by row, furrow by furrow. And the funniest part? This is your big plan. This is your career. Modern people talk about goals. Here, the goal is make lines in dirt. Put seed in lines. Hope rain comes. Hope frost doesn't. Hope animals don't eat it. Hope war doesn't walk through. Hope sickness doesn't visit. It's simple and it's enormous. Now, your stomach reminds you it exists. Breakfast. And breakfast is not a breakfast sandwich. No coffee shop, no bright cereal box. Breakfast is pottage. A grain porridge, warm, bland, filling. A bowl that tastes like this is what we have. Maybe rye, maybe oats, maybe barley, maybe wheat if you're lucky. The spoon is wood. The bowl might be wood too. You sit near the fire. The heat touches your face. Your hands wrap around the bowl like it's treasure. And it kind of is. Because warmth is treasure. Food is treasure. Dry socks would be treasure too, but let's not dream too big. You eat slowly because there's no reason to rush. The day is long, and then you go back. Back to the field, back to the same work. And here's where the cover-up starts to look less like a secret and more like a problem. Because how do you write history about this? How do you make a dramatic story about he made another line in the dirt, then another, and another? He did this for 20 years. His father did it too. His grandfather did it too. That's not exciting on paper, but it's real. It's most of human life. So if history books don't talk about it much, it's not always because someone hid it. It's because it's hard to tell without putting people to sleep, which is exactly what we're doing. So let's lean into it. Let's get even more boring. Let's watch the small things. Because small things are the truth. Your clothes are rough. Wool, linen, if you have it. You can feel the scratch on your skin. You adjust it without thinking. Your hands are already tough. Not gym calluses. Work calluses. The kind that build up like armor. You look down and see dirt under your nails and you don't care. Clean hands aren't the goal. Warm hands are the goal. You hear a crow somewhere. You hear the distant sound of someone chopping wood. Thok, thok, thok. The sound travels far because there aren't many other sounds competing with it. And then the sky shifts. Clouds, a slow dimming. Rain, not a storm, not dramatic thunder, just rain. Steady, thin, cold. It darkens the soil. It makes the mud worse. And you keep working because you don't get to pause the season. Now, if your mind is still trying to be awake, it might be asking, okay, but where's the cover-up? Fair question. So here's a little suspense, gently placed. Some people genuinely believed there was a missing time. There have been wild ideas, like somebody forged centuries or edited timelines or hid whole eras. And the reason those ideas feel tempting is because the Dark Ages can look quiet in the record. Less writing, less big stone building, less neat paperwork. So if you're the kind of person who likes mysteries, your brain goes, someone did something. But here's the contrarian answer. The missing thing isn't a secret plot. The missing thing is paperwork. It's letters. It's ink. It's archives that didn't survive fires, floods, and time. It's also the fact that peasants didn't sit down at the end of the day and write, "Dear diary, today I made mud worse." They were tired, they slept, they woke, they did it again. That's the silence. That's the blank space. And if that feels unsettling, good, because it should. It should feel strange to realize how much of human life never gets recorded. It's like walking into a huge room and realizing the lights only shine on one corner. The rest is still there. You just can't see it. Now, we're going to do something that works like a lullaby, an inventory, a list. Because lists are gentle, lists are predictable, lists are sleepy. So let's walk into a peasant home and look around. The walls are wattle and daub. That means thin branches woven like a basket. Wattle, then covered with daub, mud, straw, sometimes manure because it helps bind. Yes, manure. And before you make a face, remember you're not doing this for fun. You're doing it because it keeps wind out. It keeps warmth in. And warmth is treasure. You see a patch where the wall cracked. Someone is mixing fresh daub in a bowl. Mud, straw, a little water, hands kneading it like dough. Slow, thick, heavy, then pressing it into the crack. Smoothing it over. Pat, pat, pat. It dries later, maybe, unless it rains again, which it will. Now the roof, thatched straw, layered thick like hair. When rain hits it, it doesn't sound like rain on metal. It sounds soft, muted, a gentle tapping, a steady hush. If you've ever fallen asleep to rain sounds, you already know why this works. Rain doesn't demand attention. It just continues. Inside, there's a fire hearth, not necessarily a fireplace with a neat chimney. Sometimes it's just a fire in the center, and smoke finds its own way out. The room is dim, amber light, deep brown shadows, warmth close to the flame, coldness a few steps away, and then objects, mundane objects. The kind nobody writes poems about. A wooden stool, a clay pot, a ladle, a bucket, a rough blanket, a knife, a bundle of dried herbs hanging from a beam, a small bag of grain, and now the grains. Slowly. Rye, oats, barley, wheat, rye, oats, barley, wheat. Each one is not just a food, it's time. It's hours of work. It's a season's hope stuffed into a sack. Now the chores, grinding grain. There's a quernstone, a hand mill, 2 stones. One sits still, the other rotates. And you pour grain in, and you turn round and round, stone against stone. A soft scrape, a steady rasp. Not fast, not loud, just persistent. And you do this for hours. If you stop, there is no flour. If there is no flour, there is less food. So you turn round and round. And here's a strange thought. This sound, stone on stone, might be one of the most common sounds of human history. Not recorded, not celebrated, just lived. Now, wool. Because warmth matters. Shearing, carding, spinning, a drop spindle hangs and twists. It turns slowly. The fiber draws out in thin strands. Your fingers know the motion. Pull, twist, wrap, pull, twist, wrap. It's almost like breathing. It's almost like prayer. And if you're listening right now and your breathing is slowing, that's the point. That's the trick. That's the gift. Now let's add a tiny bit of drama. Soft drama, not loud drama. Because even in quiet times, humans are still human. Somewhere beyond this house, there's a rumor. A traveler passed through last week. He said there was fighting on a distant road. Or he said the king's men were collecting taxes. Or he said a sickness is moving through another town. Nobody knows. News takes seasons, not seconds. So a rumor is like a shadow. It stretches. It changes shape. It becomes scarier as it travels. And in the dark, it's easy to believe anything. Witches, monsters, curses, saints, signs in the sky. When your world is small and your nights are huge, your imagination gets big. This is why folklore grows here like ivy, not because people were stupid, because they were living inside uncertainty. And uncertainty makes humans look for patterns. It makes us tell stories. It makes us whisper. It makes us blame storms on something because it feels better than saying, we don't know. Because if we're honest, the most unsettling part of the Dark Ages isn't the mud. It isn't the cold. It isn't even the darkness. It's the idea that your whole life can pass you without leaving a trace. No portrait, no record, no line in a book. Just a few bones, maybe. A worn tool, a story your grandchildren forget. And that thought can feel heavy. So let's soften it. Let's turn it into something you can rest inside. Because maybe the cover-up isn't evil. Maybe it's mercy. Maybe it's the world saying, you don't have to perform for history. Maybe you can just live, work, eat, sleep, repeat. And there is something strangely calming in that. Now, before we sink deeper into the repetition, here's a midway hook. Just a little tap on your shoulder. If you're still awake, listen. What if the biggest cover-up isn't that the Dark Ages were empty, but that they weren't empty at all? What if they were full? Full of people, full of small skills, full of tiny traditions. Full of quiet knowledge passed hand to hand, not book to book. What if the world didn't forget how to live? What if it just stopped putting on a show? Hold that thought, not like homework, just like a feather resting in your palm. Because we're going to come back to it later. But not yet. For now, we go back outside. Back to the field. Because the field does not care about theories. The field wants work. The sky is low and gray. The wind is damp. The oxen are steady. Plod, plod. The plow scratches another line, row by row, furrow by furrow. And now the day slides toward noon. The light is weak. Even when the sun is up, it doesn't blaze like modern lights. It's pale, filtered, like it's tired too. You stop for a moment and flex your fingers. You feel your heartbeat, slow and steady. Not because you're relaxed. Because your body is used to this. Your body is a tool. And tools do what they're made to do. Now, let's zoom out, gently. Not with a dramatic camera, just with imagination. This isn't one person. It's thousands, millions, across regions, across years. People doing the same motions, planting, grinding, spinning, patching walls, feeding animals, fixing tools, stirring pottage, listening to wind, telling stories in low voices when night is too dark to ignore. This is medieval peasant life. This is the part that sounds boring, until you realize it's the foundation of everything that comes later. No food, No cities, no grain, no armies, no wool, no warmth, no quiet villages, no future kingdoms. The dark isn't just darkness, it's the shadow cast by what history chooses to spotlight. Now, let's talk about the label itself. Dark Ages. It's a phrase people love because it feels dramatic. It feels like a movie trailer voice could say it. In a world without light. But labels are tricky. Sometimes a label is just a mood. Sometimes it's propaganda. Sometimes it's a way for later people to feel superior. Like saying, look how enlightened we are now. And that's part of the cover-up too. Not a secret cover-up. A social one. A storytelling one. A branding one. Because if you call the past dark, you automatically make yourself bright. It's flattering. It sells. It gets repeated. And then it hardens into truth. But real life is messier. Like mud. Now, the next part of our journey is going to get even calmer, even slower. Because the deeper we go into this time, the less plot there is. And that's the point. This is the switch. We came for a mystery. Now we get chores. So let's return to the home again. Let's feel the texture of the day. You step inside and your eyes adjust to the dim. The air smells like smoke and damp wool. Someone is stirring the pot again. A wooden spoon scraping the bottom. Slow circles, slow bubbles. The sound is soft, muffled, thick. A child is half asleep in the corner. A dog sighs. Somewhere, a chicken complains. Outside, wind rubs against straw and wood. A gentle shush. And you realize something. The modern world trains your brain to expect sharp changes. New headlines, new alerts, new scenes. But here, there is no new scene. There is the same room, the same fire, the same pub, the same slow work. And your brain, hearing this, begins to unclench. Because there's nothing it needs to chase, nothing it needs to solve, no urgent puzzle. Just the steady passage of ordinary time. Now, I'm going to do something that might sound almost too simple. I'm going to list things again, because lists are sleepy. And this is monotone history in the best way. So here we go. A basket, a bowl, a cup, a rag, a needle, a thread, a candle stub, a ladle, a clay jar, a worn cloak, a rope, a wooden peg, a small iron hook, a bundle of kindling, a loaf, dense and dark, a sack of rye, a sack of oats, a sack of barley, a sack of wheat, if you're lucky, a quern stone, a spindle, a carding comb, a shears, a wool bundle, a patch of daub drying on the wall, a crack in the floor filled with straw, a simple life held together by small objects. Now, if you're drifting, let yourself drift. If your eyes are heavy, let them be heavy. If you're only half listening, perfect. Because we are settling into the real truth of the Dark Ages, not the dramatic truth, the quiet one. And the quiet truth is that the world didn't stop. It just slowed down. It became local. It became repetitive. And repetition can feel like a blank page to historians, but it feels like life to the people living it. Because when you hear Dark Ages, You might imagine a flat, dull time. But hidden inside this quiet loop are things people whisper about, not because they're glamorous, because they're human. Fear, faith, superstition, survival. The way illness can change everything overnight. The way hygiene is not a lifestyle choice, it's a struggle. The way a toothache can feel like a curse. The way people look for comfort, sometimes in prayer, sometimes in stories, sometimes in places they don't admit out loud. And yes, even scandal. Even secret corners of society. Even the things polite history doesn't like to describe. But we won't jump into that like an alarm clock. We'll approach it slowly, softly, like walking through fog. So for now, stay with the simplest sound. Rain on thatch, fire crackling low, stone against stone, round and round. And if you're still awake, here's a gentle invitation. In the next part, we're going to walk through a full day, pre-dawn to noon, in such slow detail that your brain will get bored on purpose. We'll follow the oxen again. We'll taste the pottage again. We'll feel the mud again. And somewhere inside that boredom, we'll find the real cover-up. Not a villain, not a grand secret, but the way a whole world of ordinary people can vanish from memory just because they were quiet. So if you want more boring history for sleep, and you want to keep drifting through the Middle Ages with me, subscribe or follow or save this, whatever your platform calls it. And if you're already fading, if your eyes are closing, if your breathing is slow, then you don't need to do anything at all. That's the most historically accurate choice you can make. Just rest. And let the rain keep falling. Let the fire burn low. Let the centuries go quiet. And let your mind, finally, slow down too. The rain keeps falling. Not dramatic rain, not the kind that makes you run, just the steady kind that turns the world into one big damp hush. And you know what's strange? In this world, rain isn't an annoyance. Rain is a schedule. Rain decides the pace of the day. Rain decides whether the cartwheel sinks. Rain decides how heavy your clothes feel. Rain decides if your hands stay numb for hours so you don't fight it. You accept it. You work inside it. And in a way, that's the first lesson of the Dark Ages. Not the world got stupid, not everything stopped. The lesson is simpler. The world got slower, and people learned to move at the speed of weather. Now, remember where we left that little thread of suspense. The cover-up. The unsettling idea that whole lives can pass without leaving a trace. Let's pick that thread up gently. Because if we're honest, the phrase Dark Ages does something sneaky to your brain. It suggests a void, a gap, a blackout. And once your brain believes void, it starts imagining secrets, conspiracies, hidden rooms, people erasing records, someone, somewhere, rubbing out the ink like they're hiding a crime. But what if there's a calmer explanation? What if the blankness is simply the kind of blankness that happens when fewer people are writing and when fewer things are built in stone? Because stone lasts, wood doesn't, paper burns, parchment rots, and most people's lives are made of wood and breath. So no, the truth isn't a grand conspiracy. The truth is quiet. It's ordinary. It's a time that didn't advertise itself, which is funny when you think about it. Because if there's one thing our modern world loves, it's advertising. Even your toothbrush has a brand story. Back then, the closest thing to a brand story was, "This bowl holds soup, and if it doesn't leak, it's an excellent bowl." Now, let's go back to that peasant day, because this is where the real hypnosis lives. This is where history for sleep becomes a soft loop, where boring history turns into a blanket. Where you fall asleep to history without even noticing the moment you drift off. The morning has been work. The field, the plow, the oxen, the steady breath in cold air. And now, the day slides toward noon like a slow animal stretching in the sun. You don't check a watch. There isn't one. Time isn't measured in minutes. It's measured in light, in hunger, in shadow length, in the way your stomach starts politely asking for food again. You walk back from the field. Your boots are heavier now, not because the boots changed, because the mud added itself to you. Mud is clingy. Mud is a relationship you didn't ask for. Mud is the kind of friend who says, "I'm coming with you," and then never leaves. You push open the door. It groans a little. Wood speaks here. It creaks. It sighs. It complains. And inside, the warmth is waiting. Small and stubborn in the center of the room. The fire is lower now, but it's alive. It pops softly. It breathes. Someone feeds it a thin stick. The flames respond like they're grateful, and the smell hits you. Smoke, wet wool drying near heat, a pot simmering. It's pottage again, because yes, it's pottage again. And this is where the boredom becomes powerful, because the dark ages are not a buffet. They are not, "What do you feel like today?" They are, "What do we have?" And the answer is usually grain. So you eat. Bland, warm, filling. A taste that doesn't excite you, but it steadies you. And you know what? That might be the most honest kind of comfort. Not excitement. Steadiness. Now while you eat, your mind does what minds do. It wanders. It listens. It catches pieces of conversation. Low voices. Soft words. Because loud words waste energy. Someone mentions a neighbor's roof leaking. Someone mentions an animal that's sick. Someone mentions a traveler who passed on the road. And suddenly, the room tightens just a little. Because travelers are news. Travelers are a living newspaper. Travelers are a moving rumor machine. And when news takes seasons to travel, a traveler feels like a miracle, or a warning, or both. What did he say? Where was he coming from? What did he see? And you get fragments. A town you've never visited. A market you'll never see. A lord's men collecting dues. A bridge washed out. A sickness. Always somewhere the whisper of sickness. It's not even fear yet. It's just awareness. A quiet alertness that sits in the background of life, like wind behind clouds. Now here comes a small twist, a soft contrarian whisper. Because when people imagine daily life in the dark ages, they imagine a flat gray misery. But real life is rarely one color. Even in hard times, people laugh. Even in mud, people flirt. Even in cold, people tell jokes. They just tell them quietly. So imagine someone half smiling, saying something like, "If the mud gets any deeper, we'll start growing fish." And someone else answers, "Good, then we'll finally have a new meal." It's small humor, peasant humor, not a comedy special, Just a little warmth between people. A reminder that humans are humans in every century. Now you finish eating, and there's no dramatic next scene. There's just more work, because the day is a rope and you keep pulling it hand over hand. So let's move into the grind again, back outside. And here is where the two-field system becomes more than a fact. It becomes a feeling, because everything in this life is about managing what you have, and what you have is limited. So you don't try to squeeze the earth until it screams. You let one field rest. It sounds wise, doesn't it? It sounds almost modern. Rest. And yet, it's not a gentle rest. It's practical. It's survival. Because tired soil gives less, and tired people give less too. Now, you might be thinking, so why do people call this time dark? Good question. Let's answer it like a bedtime story, softly, with a little honesty. The dark idea comes partly from later writers, people who looked back and said, wow, the Romans built big stuff, and then later people built smaller stuff. So they called it déclin, they called it backward, they called it dark. And yes, in parts of Western Europe, big city life shrank. Some roads weren't maintained, some trade networks weakened, some education systems changed. But here's the cover-up shape. Calling it dark makes it sound like everyone everywhere was stumbling around confused. That isn't true. Even in places where life got simpler, it didn't get empty. People still made tools, people still farmed, people still built, people still sang. People still argued. People still prayed. And in other parts of the world, life didn't go dark at all. In the East, the Roman world didn't vanish the same way. And beyond Europe, other regions were building, thinking, reading, writing. So the big secret isn't missing centuries. The big secret is that the label Dark Ages is kind of unfair. It's like looking at someone's quiet weekend and calling it a personal collapse. Maybe they're just resting. Maybe they're just living small. Maybe they're not trying to impress anybody. And that's why I keep calling this a bait and switch. Because we come in expecting drama, but the truth is often slow. Now, let's go back to the field, because the field doesn't care about labels. The oxen are waiting, and the oxen are the best teachers in this whole story. They do not rush, they do not panic, they do not overthink. They just move forward, plod, plod. Their breath clouds the air, their hide is warm under your hand, even when everything else is cold. And the plow, your simple scratch plow, scrapes another line, row by row, furrow by furrow. The earth opens like a slow zipper. Now, here's where we slow down even more, because this part is deeply, wonderfully boring, and I mean that as a compliment. You are guiding the plow. You're watching the line. You're making sure it stays straight enough. Not perfect, just usable. Straight enough that you can do the next line beside it. Straight enough that the seed will sit where it should. And when you turn at the edge of the field, you feel that small physical effort. The oxen pivot slowly, the wood frame creaks. You adjust your stance. Your boots grip. The mud tries to slide. You keep your balance. And you start again. Row by row, furrow by furrow, and if you are listening in bed, let your breathing copy the rhythm. In, out, slow, steady, now seed time. You reach into a bag, your fingers touch grain, hard little shapes, Simple little things, you scatter them, not in a cinematic slow motion way, just scatter. A handful, a handful, a handful. Each toss is a tiny decision, and each toss is also faith. Because once the seed goes into the earth, you can't control what happens next. You can only wait. And waiting is a huge part of this life. Waiting for rain, waiting for sun, waiting for warmth, waiting for harvest, waiting for winter to end, waiting for someone to come back from a road, waiting for sickness to pass. Waiting is the background music of the Dark Ages. And background music is perfect for sleep. Now, let's shift to another slow corner of the day, the quernstone again. Because not everyone is in the field at the same time. Some people are inside doing work that feels even more repetitive. Grinding grain, round and round, stone against stone, hours and hours and hours, and you can almost hear it in your mind now, can't you? That gentle rasp, that soft, gritty whisper. It's not loud enough to be annoying, it's just there. Like a slow metronome, round and round. Now think about that. Modern people pay money for white noise machines. Back then, the house was a white noise machine. Wind outside, rain on thatch, fire murmuring, stone grinding, someone stirring a pot. A spindle turning. Everything is motion, but it's slow motion. Everything is work, but it's soft work. Not soft in difficulty, soft in sound. And sound matters in a world with no loud machines. Now, let's do another inventory, not because we ran out of ideas, because inventories work. They calm the mind. They create the grocery list effect. So here's a slow catalog of a simple home. A bench, a stool, a rough table, a pot, a smaller pot, a ladle, a bowl with a chip, a cup, a jar, a sack, a strap, a rope, a bundle of wool, a needle, a thread, a dull knife, a sharpening stone, a bucket. A broom made from twigs, a quernstone, a spindle, a comb for carding wool, a patch of fresh daub drying on the wall, wattle beneath it woven like a tired basket, and above, the roof, thick straw holding back weather one layer at a time. Now, let's talk about that wall, because this is where bland history becomes oddly fascinating. Wattle and daub isn't glamorous, but it's clever. You take flexible branches, you weave them, you create a lattice, then you smear mud mixture into it. Mud, straw, sometimes manure, and it dries into a tough surface. Not perfect, not sealed like modern walls, but enough. Enough to slow wind, enough to keep warmth near the fire, enough to make a house. And if you've ever built anything with your own hands, anything at all, you know how satisfying enough can feel. Not perfection. Enough. Now, here's another little suspense thread. Because when people say the Dark Ages were stagnant, they hide something. They hide how much skill it takes to survive simply. They hide how much knowledge sits in hands, not books. Like knowing how to mix daub so it doesn't crack too fast. Knowing how to dry wool without letting it smell too badly. Knowing how to store grain so it doesn't rot. Knowing when to plant, even without a weather app. Knowing what herbs help a cough. Knowing how to read a sky. That is knowledge. It's not written in a fancy manuscript, but it's real. And if that knowledge isn't recorded, it doesn't mean it didn't exist. It means it lived in people. And people don't last. Now, I want to bring in the cover-up idea again gently, like a blanket being pulled up, because you came here for that question. What was history's biggest cover-up? And the quiet answer keeps forming. The cover-up is not somebody hiding a treasure. It's not a secret council erasing centuries. It's the way later centuries told a story that made ordinary people disappear. They made the era sound like one big yawn. And yes, we are yawning on purpose, but we are also noticing something. This boring life is the foundation. It's the base layer. It's the soil everything else grows from. So if you ever felt like your own life is too ordinary to matter, if you ever worried you're not doing enough, achieving enough, shining enough, the Dark Ages have an oddly comforting message for you. Most of life has always been ordinary, and ordinary life is not failure. It's life. Now, let's move through the village. A slow walk, because villages aren't silent all the time. They have a low murmur, a gentle pulse. A dog barks once, then stops. A child runs, then slows. Someone calls a name. A hammer taps a nail. Not fast, tap, 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 the sound of a tool meeting wood. And somewhere you smell something slightly sour, maybe old ale, maybe damp cloth, maybe the sharpness of smoke. And you see people, not as a crowd, as individuals. A woman carrying water, a man fixing a fence, an older person sitting near a doorway, hands busy with fiber. And each person has the same calm urgency, not panic, just the steady understanding that chores don't do themselves. Now, if this were a normal documentary, this is where they'd cut to battles. Kings, swords, metal clashing, but this is not that kind of show. This is a relaxing history documentary designed like bedtime stories for adults. So, we stay here, in the slow, in the small. Now, let's bring in a little drama without waking you up, because even in quiet times, there are sharp edges. A village is not a hug. A village is a machine, a social machine, and machines have friction. Who gets the best strip of land? Who owes what to whom? Who is behind on dues? Who is sick and can't work? Who is suspected of doing something wrong? And in a world with limited explanations, suspicion can grow easily. Someone's cow dies, someone's child gets a fever, someone's crops look weak, and the mind goes searching. Why? Why us? Why now? And that's where stories, sometimes beautiful stories, sometimes frightening ones, sometimes stories about saints, sometimes stories about spirits, sometimes stories about women who know too much about herbs, sometimes stories that turn into blame. Not because people were villains, because fear needs a target. Fear hates empty space. Because we're going to circle back to this, not with sensational yelling, but with quiet truth. The Dark Ages weren't only slow, they were also intense in a soft way. Faith, fear, resilience, and yes, strange corners of society that later writers either exaggerated or pretended didn't exist. But for now, we keep our voice slow. We keep the tone heavy and damp and calm, because the day is still moving, and it's time to feel the seasons. Because nothing in this era makes sense unless you feel the year as a loop, a cycle, a wheel. So let's step into the seasonal loop. Spring, the thaw, the first softness in the air. Not warmth exactly, just less cruelty. The ground loosens, and the village becomes Mud again. More mud. Fresh mud. Mud that looks innocent and then steals your shoes. Planting begins. Seeds go in. Hands work. Backs bend. The rhythm returns. Summer heat. Flies. A buzzing cloud of tiny life. The days are long. Work stretches into evening. Haymaking. Scything grass. And if you listen closely, you can hear it. Swish, swish, swish. A blade moving through green. A steady sound. Almost like slow breathing. Autumn. Harvest. The tense relief of gathering what you hoped for. Bundles of grain, straw piled, food stored, and then the preservation, salting meat, smoking fish, drying what can be dried. Because winter is coming, and winter is not a metaphor here. Winter is a physical thing, a season that can hurt you. Winter, the long quiet, the village draws inward. People huddle near fire. Wind scratches at the walls. Snow muffles everything outside until the whole world sounds like it's been wrapped in cloth. And you know what that muffled quiet does to a human mind? It turns thoughts louder. It makes stories stronger. It makes prayer feel closer. It makes fear creep in sometimes, but it also brings a kind of stillness that modern people rarely experience. A stillness so deep it's almost holy. And now, notice what the seasons do to your own body, just listening. Your shoulders loosen, your breath deepens, your mind starts to float, because cycles are sleepy. They tell your brain, nothing sudden is coming. They tell your nervous system, you're safe. Now, let's slow down into another list. A seasonal inventory. In spring, wet boots, soft soil, cold hands, seed sacks, cautious hope. In summer, sweat, flies, sun on skin, long light, scythe sounds, tired arms. In autumn, full sacks, sharp air, smoke from fires, salt on meat, hands stained from work. In winter, thick clothing, low fire, quiet rooms, wind outside, darkness early, long nights. And then, spring again. And then, summer again. And then, autumn again. And then, winter again. A loop, a wheel. And in the middle of that wheel is your ordinary life. Now, let's do the midway hook again, but softly. Because if you're still awake, I want your mind to have a small treat. Just a small spark of curiosity. Here it is. What if the real cover-up is that this era wasn't empty? It was just unrecorded. And what if the reason it feels blank is because it wasn't designed for us? It wasn't built to impress future people. It was built to keep warm, to eat, to survive. Which means it was honest. And honesty is rarely glamorous. Now, I promised we'd offer value in the middle. So let's make one thing crystal clear, simple enough that even a 10-year-old could get it. The Dark Ages are not one single thing. They're not the same everywhere. They're not even the same from one decade to the next. Some places are struggling. Some places are stable. Some places have trade. Some places are isolated. Some places are building churches. Some places are building halls. Some places are writing. Some places are speaking stories out loud because writing is rare. So if someone tells you the Dark Ages were just nothing, you can gently say, no, people were living. And if someone says it was all a conspiracy, you can say, no, it was mostly quiet. And if someone says it was all misery, you can say it was work. It was fear sometimes. It was faith. It was laughter, too. That's the balanced truth. Not dramatic, but real. Now, we are going to drift deeper into the inventory phase again, because this is where sleep happens. This is where monotone history becomes a soft fog. So imagine you are counting slowly the parts of the day. The chores. 1. Carry water. 2. Feed animals. 3. Check the roof. 4. Stir the pot. 5. Gather wood. 6. Grind grain. 7. Spin wool. 8. Patch a wall. 9. Repair a strap. 10. Walk to the field. 11. Guide the oxen. 12. Scatter seed. 13. Turn the plow. 14. Turn again. 15. Turn again. And then tomorrow, the list repeats. And next week, it repeats. And next month, it repeats. And the year turns like a slow wheel. Now, if you're still holding on to the cover-up idea with both hands, relax your grip. Let it sit loosely. The cover-up wasn't about hiding secrets. It was about how later people decided what counts as important. They chose kings. They chose wars. They chose big buildings. They chose shiny stories. And they left out the mud. They left out the quern stone. They left out the spindle's whir. They left out the long winter hush. They left out the endless pottage. They left out the ordinary human heartbeat of the era. And when you remove the ordinary, you create a false picture. A picture that says nothing was happening, when really everything was happening, just slowly. Now, we are going to step into a slightly darker corner for a moment, not to scare you, to be honest, because the Middle Ages, often miscalled the Dark Ages, had grit. And if you've ever seen a video or podcast that claims to reveal the hidden parts, superstition, survival, scandal, it's usually trying to shock you. We won't do shock. We'll do gentle truth. So here it is. Hygiene wasn't a neat modern routine. It was effort. Water is heavy. Soap is not in a plastic bottle. Warm water is rare, so people smell like life. Smoke, animals, work, and sickness moves in that environment more easily. A cough can become serious. A wound can become dangerous. And teeth can be cruel. No gentle dentist appointment, no numbing gel. A bad tooth can throb for days. It can change your mood. It can make sleep hard. And people try things. Herbs, warm rinses, prayers. Sometimes painful extractions with simple tools. Not because they liked pain, because pain was already there, and they wanted it to stop. Now, that might make you shiver a little. So let's soften again. Let's return to the safest sound. The fire. Crackle, a low pop, a soft hiss, and outside, rain, steady rain, like a lullaby. Now, if you're drifting, let yourself drift. If you're still listening, I'll keep guiding you, because next we are going to do something even more hypnotic. We're going to follow the year one more time, but slower. We're going to stretch it, so it becomes less like a history lesson and more like a soft, repeating dream. Spring arrives, but it arrives slowly. A little less frost, a little more water in the air, a smell of soil waking up. People step out and squint at light, not because it's bright, because they've been inside so much. The first planting begins, hands cold, seeds hard, hope gentle. Summer stretches, the days feel endless, work becomes sweat. Fields sway, grain grows tall, the wind moves across it like a slow wave, and the sound is almost nothing. Just the whisper of plants rubbing together. autumn returns. The air sharpens, smoke rises more often, the harvest comes in. People feel relief and anxiety at the same time, because even a good harvest isn't a guarantee. It's just a better chance. Then winter. Darkness early, fire closer, stories quieter, village wrapped in snow silence, and in that silence you can almost hear your own heartbeat. Slow, slow, now. We're approaching the point where a normal documentary would reveal the big twist, but our twist is gentle. Our twist is rest. So here's your calm reveal, placed like a pillow. Maybe the biggest cover-up is that the Dark Ages weren't a dramatic villain story. They were a long exhale, a slower rhythm, a world not rushing to be seen. And if that feels strangely comforting, it should. Because the modern world trains you to rush, to keep up, to chase, to prove, to shine. This era doesn't ask you to shine. It asks you to endure, to repeat simple actions, to trust seasons, to sleep when it's dark, to wake when there's light, to live small and steady. And there's something in that your nervous system understands. Now, let's bring it back to you just for a moment, because I want to confirm the frame of reference again, what you thought before and what you know now. Before, Dark Ages might have meant a blank, a void, a mysterious missing chunk. Now, Dark Ages can mean a quiet time, a slower world, a lot of ordinary people doing ordinary work day after day. Not glamorous, not recorded much, but real. And if you ever feel like your own days are repetitive, if your own life feels like chores, if you ever think, is this all there is? The Dark Ages whisper back, yes, and that's okay, because all there is can be enough. Now, we're going to keep going. In the next section, we'll drift into even longer inventories. We'll count grains again, rye, oats, barley, wheat, slowly. We'll stay on one image in our mind for a long time, like a candle flame in a dark room. We'll let the story fade toward pure calm. And somewhere in that calm, we'll return one final time to the cover-up idea and lay it down gently, like closing a heavy wooden door, not with a bang, with a soft, quiet click. So if you're still awake, you can keep listening. If you're halfway gone, perfect. If you're fully ready to sleep, even better. Because this is history audiobook for sleep. This is calm narration history. This is the slow, warm truth behind the label. And the rain is still falling, and the fire is still low, and the village is still quiet, and the centuries are still turning, slowly, softly, over and over. The candle flame leans, not because it's tired, because the air shifts. A small draft sneaks through a crack in the wall, and the flame bends like it's listening. It flickers, it steadies, it flickers again. And in that one tiny movement, you can feel the whole truth of this era. Nothing is fixed, nothing is sealed tight. Everything is a little porous, a little open to weather, a little open to chance, which means people don't build their lives on certainty. They build them on routine, on repetition, on the same small acts, done again and again, until the body memorizes them. And when the body memorizes something, the mind can finally relax. That's why boring history for sleep works. Because the Dark Ages were not a fireworks show, they were a slow heartbeat. And tonight, we follow that heartbeat. Slowly, quietly, like footsteps in wet grass. Now, let's return to the home. Because the home is the center of everything. It's the safe circle of warmth. It's the only indoor world most people have. And it's where the inventory of life lives. You step inside again. Your eyes adjust. Your cheeks feel warmer. Your hands loosen. The smell of smoke is familiar now, like a coat you've been wearing for months. And you notice the little things, the quiet things, the things nobody writes down. A patch of mud on the floor where someone tracked it in earlier. A piece of straw stuck to a hem. A broken thread on a sleeve. A pot lid that doesn't quite fit. A spoon with a notch carved into it. Tiny evidence of human hands, human days, human repetition. And now the inventory list begins again. Not because we ran out of story, because the list is the story. So let's count what we see. A bucket, a second bucket cracked near the rim, a shallow bowl, a deep bowl, a cup with a stain, a clay jar for salt, a jar for dried beans if you have them, a sack of grain, a smaller sack of grain tied with rope, a wooden stool, a bench, a bundle of kindling, a larger log saved for later, a rag, a needle, a thread, a spindle, a carding comb, a quern stone, a dull knife, a sharpening stone, a broom made from twigs, a bundle of wool that smells faintly of sheep, and near the wall, a place where the daub is drying. Mud, straw, a little grit, pressed into the wattle lattice like icing, except nobody's having fun. It dries slowly. And while it dries, the village keeps breathing. Now, the sound. Stone against stone. Round and round. The quern turns. Someone's arms move in a patient circle. Not fast, not strong, steady. And it's a sound you can almost fall into. Scrape, rasp, scrape, rasp. Now, I want you to notice something about your own mind. Modern life trains you to look for new posts, new updates, new scenes, new drama. But this home doesn't offer new. It offers same. And the same is soothing. Same fire, same wall, same pot, same grain, same slow circle of the quern, same soft smoke in the air, same quiet bodies moving around each other. So your mind starts to settle. It says, okay, I don't have to chase anything. And that's when sleep can arrive. Now, let's walk into one of the most boring, most powerful parts of medieval life. The grain. Because grain is everything. Grain is breakfast. Grain is dinner. Grain is survival. Grain is the difference between we're fine and we are not fine. So when we say, let's list grain slowly, it's not just a sleepy trick. It's the real center of the era. So let's do it. Rye, oats, barley, wheat, rye, oats, barley, wheat. And you can almost taste the differences. Rye, darker, heavier. Oats, softer, plain. Barley, earthy. Wheat, lighter, more prized. Now imagine someone counting the sacks. Not with excitement, with focus. 1 sack, 2 sacks, 3 sacks, 4. They tie them, they move them. They lift with careful backs because one injury can ruin a season. And again, you feel how small life is here. How close everything sits to the edge. Now, here comes a gentle bit of suspense. Because when you live near the edge, you become sensitive to signs. You start listening harder. You start watching the sky like it's a person with a mood. You start noticing tiny changes. A colder wind, a strange smell, a cough that lasts too long, a bird behaving oddly, a patch of mold on stored grain, and your mind starts to whisper questions. What if? What if the harvest fails? What if the animal dies? What if the sickness comes here next? Those questions are always present, not screaming, whispering, like the flame leaning toward a draft. Now, a normal documentary would jump into panic, but we won't. We'll stay soft, because even fear in this world becomes routine. You can't panic every day. You'd run out of breath. So instead, you prepare. You store, you patch, you count, you repeat. And the repetition itself is a kind of calm. Now, let's drift into another part of the inventory. The chores. The chores are so consistent, they almost become a lullaby. So let's list them. Carry water, feed the animals, check the fence, gather wood, stir the pot, turn the quern, patch the wall, card the wool, spin the wool, repair a strap, sharpen a blade, sweep the floor, shake out the bedding, carry more water, and then do it again tomorrow, and again, and again. Now, if you're still awake, you might be thinking, okay, but where's the biggest cover-up part? Where's the twist? Fair. So let's place a twist gently in your hand, like giving you a warm cup. Here it is. The cover-up is not that nothing happened. The cover-up is that later people acted like only big events matter. And because peasants didn't write books. Later people acted like peasants didn't matter. But peasants were the majority. Peasants were the engine. Peasants were the hands that held up the whole roof of society. So when history tells the story like it was just kings and battles, that's not just incomplete, it's misleading. It's like describing a house by only talking about the paint color and never mentioning the walls. Now, we can keep that thought, but we don't need to hold it tightly. We can let it float, because we're going to sink deeper into the slow. Now, step outside again. Yes, again. Because the outside is part of the loop, and the loop is the point. The village outside is damp and muted. Fog sits low like a blanket. A crow calls once, then stops, as if it remembers this is a quiet place. A cartwheel is stuck in a rut. A person pushes. Slow effort, no dramatic music. Just the thick sound of mud resisting. And that mud, it deserves its own chapter, honestly. Because when historians talk about decline, they talk about politics and trade. But if you asked an ordinary person what defined their day, they'd say mud. Mud in the road, mud in the field, mud on your shoes, mud splashing your legs, mud drying on your hem, mud that cracks into dust later, mud that returns again with the next rain. Mud is the texture of the era. Mud is the background color. Mud is the unglamorous truth. Now, if you're listening in bed, let mud become a metaphor for your own stress, the stuff that clings, the stuff that follows you, the stuff you didn't invite but somehow picked up anyway. And then let it fall away. Because right now, in your bed, you don't need to carry it. You can put it down. Like stepping into a home and taking off heavy boots. Now, let's go somewhere else in the village. Somewhere even more boring. The wool work. Because wool is warmth, and warmth is life. Shearing happens when it's time. A blade slides through fleece. The sheep shifts. The fleece comes off in heavy sheets, then carding, combing the fibers so they line up, then spinning, drop spindle turning. Whir, slow, your fingers pull the fibers out gently, not too thin, not too thick, steady, and this work has its own rhythm. Pull, twist, wrap, pull, twist, wrap. If you're still awake, I dare you to stay awake through that rhythm. It's like a spell, a soft spell. Now, here's a small moment of humor because humans always find humor. Imagine someone watching the spindle half asleep and saying, "If that spindle gets any slower, it'll stop and ask for a nap." And someone else, without even looking up, answers, "Let it. It's done more work than you." Small laughs, quiet laughs, the kind that don't disturb the baby in the corner. Now, let's talk about night, because night is where the dark part gets real physically. There's no light pollution, no street glow, no neon signs. When the candle goes out, darkness arrives like a curtain dropping. And outside, if you step away from the firelight, the sky opens. Stars. A ridiculous number of stars. So many that modern eyes might feel overwhelmed. Like the sky is crowded, and the Milky Way isn't a faint hint. It's a pale river, a band of light dust across the black. Now, what does that do to a human mind? It makes you feel small. It makes you feel watched sometimes. It makes you feel close to something bigger than your village. And in the Dark Ages, that feeling often becomes faith, or fear, or both. Because the night sky isn't just pretty. It's also a screen for meaning. Comets, eclipses, strange lights, people see them and wonder, what does it mean? And when your world is uncertain, you want meaning. You want patterns. So the sky becomes a message board. And sometimes the messages feel comforting. Sometimes they feel like warnings. And the stories spread. Slowly. Like smoke. Now, we're not going to jump into dramatic superstition talk. We'll just acknowledge it softly. People believed in signs because signs made the world feel less random. And when life is hard, feeling less random can be a kind of comfort. Now, let's return to the seasonal loop again because repetition is soothing. Spring again, wet thaw, mud, planting, summer again, heat, flies, haymaking, swish, swish, autumn again, harvest, smoke, storing food, winter again, long nights, wind, stillness, and inside that stillness, the village becomes quiet enough that even the smallest sound feels important. A log shifting in the fire, a spoon tapping a bowl, a cough, a sigh, a blanket rustling. Now, I want to bring in something you mentioned earlier, those hidden social corners people talk about in modern content. The scandalous bits, the whispered bits, the stuff that gets turned into clickbait. We'll do it calmly. Because yes, people had private lives. Yes, people had desires. Yes, people broke rules. Yes, people found ways to do what humans do in every century. Hide things from neighbors. And yes, religious life was strong, but not always simple. People could be deeply faithful and still messy. They could pray and still gossip. They could fear sin and still sin. They could love and still betray. That's not a Dark Ages thing. That's a human thing. But later history often tells a cleaner story. Either everyone was holy or everyone was filthy. The truth is, they were just people, trying, failing, trying again. This is where the cover-up idea becomes emotional. Because when history paints the era as one big dull void, it steals the humanity. It turns real people into background scenery. It erases their jokes, their arguments, their small kindnesses, their tired love, their quiet bravery. And that is a kind of cover-up, not done by villains, done by storytelling habits. Now, let's go back to the most boring, most comforting thing again, the list. Because lists help the mind stop running, so we'll do a longer one. A slow catalog of a peasant day. Wake before light, feel cold air, stir the embers, add a stick, watch the flame rise. Warm your hands, drink a little water, eat pottage, put on rough clothes, tie a strap, step into mud, walk to the animals, check the oxen, hear their breath, touch warm hide, fix the harness, walk to the field, guide the plow, row by row, furrow by furrow, turn at the edge, begin again, scatter seed, watch it fall, feel the weight of the bag, walk back, eat again, carry water, turn the quern round and round, stone against stone, card wool, spin wool, pull, twist, wrap, patch the wall, mud, straw, press, move, sweep the floor, feed the fire, sit, listen to wind, listen to rain, sleep, and then do it again. Now, if your eyes are heavy, you're doing it right. If your mind is drifting, good. If you're still awake and thinking, this is too calm, that's okay too. Your nervous system might just need more time. So we keep going. Now, let's zoom out for a moment, but softly, because one of the sneakiest parts of the Dark Ages story is that it makes you imagine everyone everywhere was living the same way. They weren't. Even within Europe, regions differed. Coasts had trade, rivers carried goods, towns existed, markets happened, craftspeople worked, and beyond Europe, the world was not sleeping. But the Dark Ages label tends to center one story, one place, and pretend it's the whole planet. That's another cover-up shape, not malicious, just narrow. So tonight, when we say Dark Ages, we're really talking about a particular mood in a particular part of history. A mood of smaller networks, local life, less written record, more oral tradition, more day-to-day survival. And if you keep that nuance, you're already smarter than most loud internet arguments, which is a funny thought, because you might be half asleep right now. Now, let's return to the village soundscape again, because sound is the key to sleep. Wind in straw, soft, rain on thatch, muted. Fire crackling, gentle, stone grinding, round and round, a spindle whir, low, a distant dog bark, one, then silence. Everything is spaced out, nothing is urgent. Now, I want to offer a small emotional moment because you asked for emotional value too. Here it is. Imagine a child in this village, a small child. Their world is tiny. They know their home. They know the field. They know the path to water. They know a few faces. They know a few stories. They don't know the Dark Ages. They don't know they're in a cover-up. They're just alive, and they learn by watching. They watch hands mixing mud. They watch grain being poured. They watch wool being spun. They watch fire being fed. They watch oxen moving slow, and those motions become their future. Not because someone trapped them, because that's the world they were born into. Now, if you're listening and you feel a little tenderness in your chest, that's normal, because there's something soft about human continuity. Generations passing skills like quiet gifts, no trophies, no applause, just this is how we live. And yes, it can feel sad because it can feel limited, but it can also feel steady, like a rhythm that holds you, because somewhere in that child's future something will change, not overnight, slowly. Trade will shift. Tools will change, ideas will spread, the world will speed up again. But right now, in this moment, they are in the slow world, and slow worlds have their own kind of peace. Now, let's bring in one more contrarian thought, because it keeps the mind lightly curious without waking it. What if the Dark Ages were not dark like evil, but dark like a theater after the show? When the audience leaves, and the stage lights go down, and the room becomes quiet again, not because nothing exists, because the performance ended. The empire performance ended. The big Roman machine stopped, and what remained was people. Ordinary people, living, eating, sleeping, repeating. So maybe the Dark Ages weren't a collapse into nothing. Maybe they were a return to basics. And if you've ever been exhausted by modern noise, you might secretly understand the appeal. Now, we'll drift closer to the fade-out part of the story. Not the end yet, but closer. Because the further we go, the simpler the language becomes, the softer the sounds, the heavier the mood. So let's step into winter again. This time, slower. The village under snow, the paths disappear. Footsteps leave temporary marks. Everything is quieter. Snow absorbs sound, like the world has been padded. Inside, people sit close to the fire, not because they want to cuddle, because warmth doesn't travel far. So you stay near it, and you notice how darkness changes behavior. When it's dark, you don't waste energy. You don't roam. You don't go out for fun. You rest, you mend, you tell stories softly, you listen to wind outside, you fall asleep earlier. Your body follows the sky. And there is something about that, something our modern bodies miss. Now, one last list, a winter list. Firewood, ash, embers, smoke, wool blanket, wool cloak, wool socks if you have them, a bowl of pottage, a crust of bread, a candle stub, a prayer whispered low, wind outside, snow settling on the roof, silence, and then sleep. Now we return to the cover-up idea one more time, but gently. Not like an accusation, like a conclusion. So perhaps the cover-up wasn't about hiding secrets. It was just rest. The world took a breath. It slowed down. It went quiet. And in that quiet, the loud parts of history, marble, battles, big speeches, faded. So later people looked back and said, "It's dark." But maybe it wasn't dark. Maybe it was dim, candlelit, local, human-sized. And now, you can be dim too. You can let your thoughts soften. You can let your day fade. You can let the noise stop, because for the next few moments, all you need is the sound of wind, rain, and a low fire. And if you're still awake, that's fine. We'll keep walking the loop. But if you're already drifting, if you're halfway into sleep, that's perfect. Because this is boring history. This is history for sleep. This is how you fall asleep to history. Not with a big twist, with a slow, steady hush. And the candle flame leans again, and steadies. And the village stays quiet, and the world moves at the speed of a tired horse, slowly, softly, over and over. The world keeps doing what it does. It turns, it cools, it warms, it rains again, and the village stays small. Not small like unimportant, small like close enough to hold in your hands, small like you can walk from one end to the other before your soup gets cold, small like you know the sound of everyone's footsteps. And when your world is that small, you don't need big plans. You need steady ones. So the next morning arrives the same way the last one did. Not with an alarm, not with a bright screen, with cold air, with breath in the dark, with a fire that has gone low and needs a little care. You stir the embers, you add a thin stick. The flame returns slowly, like it's waking up too. And for a moment, you just watch it. Because watching fire is one of the oldest calm things humans have ever done. It doesn't demand anything. It just moves, softly, in small shapes. Then you hear it again. That familiar sound, a quiet life sound. An animal shifting, a faint scrape outside, somebody else somewhere starting their day. Not loudly, just beginning. Now, if you're listening in bed and your mind is trying to drift away, let it drift. You can miss a sentence. You can miss a whole paragraph. It's fine. This is history for sleep. This is boring history. This is a relaxing history documentary you don't have to keep up with. You're allowed to sink. Now, we go back to the inventory, because the inventory is the gentle engine of this era. And the more we list, the more your brain relaxes, because it knows what's coming next. So let's list slowly the tools that keep a village alive. A wooden yoke for oxen, a leather strap, a rope with frayed fibers, a simple plow, the scratch plow, the yard, a hoe, a spade, a sickle, a scythe for summer grass, a wooden rake, a basket woven from reeds, a bucket, a larger bucket, a stone for sharpening, a knife that has been used so long it feels like part of the hand, a clay pot for cooking, a pot hook, a ladle, a quernstone, a spindle, a carding comb, a needle, a thread, a loom, simple and sturdy for weaving, a wooden peg, a small iron hook, a broom, a stool, a bench, a rough table, a straw mattress, a wool blanket, a cloak that smells like smoke because everything smells like smoke, and each object is not just an object, it's a habit, it's a repeated motion, it's how we do things. Now we drift closer to one of the most sleepy parts of all, maintenance. Modern people don't think about maintenance much until something breaks. But in this era, life is maintenance. If you don't maintain, you don't survive. So today, someone is checking the roof. The thatch. Because thatch is not set it and forget it. Thatch is like hair. It needs care. It needs smoothing. It needs patching. It needs replacing. So a person climbs up carefully. Slow movements, hands feeling for loose bundles, tucking straw back in, pressing it down, making the roof dense enough to push rain away. And as they work, rain taps softly, not angry, just steady. Tap, tap, tap. If you listen closely, it's almost like fingers on a drum, but slower. And while the roof is being checked, someone else is doing another quiet chore. They're checking the wall, wattle and daub. They find a small crack, a thin line where cold air sneaks through, so they mix daub again, Mud, straw, sometimes manure because it binds. They knead it with hands like bread dough, slow, thick, heavy. Then they press it into the crack, smooth it, pat it, let it dry. And the wall looks better, not beautiful. Better is enough. Now, here's a small question to hold your curiosity without waking you up. Why does all this feel so calming? Why does mud and straw and slow work feel like a lullaby? Because nothing here is trying to impress you. Nothing is trying to sell you anything. Nothing is trying to make you outraged. It's just life, stripped down. And sometimes, stripped down life is exactly what a tired mind wants. Now, the village has a rhythm that moves beyond a single home. There's something like a weekly pulse, not a schedule you can read on a calendar, more like a feeling. And one of the most noticeable pulses is a market day. Not a big city market with banners and noise. A village market, a small gathering. A few people bring goods, a few people look, a few people trade. And the trades are not shopping. They're practical, they're careful, they're quiet. A basket of eggs, a small bag of grain, a piece of cloth, a little salt if you have it, a tool repaired by someone with steady hands. And if you walk through it, you hear soft bargaining. Not loud, not dramatic, just people trying to get by. Now, this is where a normal documentary might get excited and say, trade, economy. But we keep it gentle because the market in this era is mostly a list. So let's list what might be on a simple market table. A loaf of dark bread, a wedge of cheese, a bundle of onions, dried beans, a handful of apples, small and bruised, a little honey, a strip of smoked fish, a small sack of rye, a small sack of oats, a small sack of barley, a bundle of wool, a piece of linen cloth, a clay cup, a wooden spoon, a candle stub, a needle, a bit of thread, a knife, not new, but sharpened, a belt, a rope, a repaired pot, and over it all, the same damp air, the same mud underfoot, the same soft hush of a slow world. Now you may notice something interesting. This is not nothing. This is not blank. It's just not flashy. And that's the contrarian point again, sliding in quietly. The Dark Ages label makes it sound like people stopped doing things. But here is a market. Here are goods. Here are crafts. Here is the slow movement of value from hand to hand. It's not a void. It's a smaller network, a calmer network. Now, let's step away from the market and follow the sound that often marks time in many villages. A bell, not an electronic beep. A real bell, metal, heavy. Its sound spreads far in quiet air, and it doesn't ring constantly. It rings sometimes, a call, a marker, a reminder. And for many people, it pulls them toward a church or a small gathering place. Now, I want to be careful here because religion can be loud when people argue about it. But in this story, we're not here to argue. We're here to feel the mood of the era. And the mood is that faith is not a hobby. It's a structure. It's a comfort. It's a way of explaining the things nobody can control. Weather, sickness, death, birth, fear, hope. So people pray, sometimes with deep sincerity, sometimes with habit, sometimes with both. Because in the background of this faith life, there are people who write. Not many, but some. Monks, scribes, people in monasteries. And if you want to know why some knowledge survives at all, why any books make it through the centuries, it's partly because of those quiet rooms, those slow hands, those careful eyes. So the darkness story gets complicated again. Because, yes, some records are lost, but some are made. And in certain places, writing is like a candle in the night, small but steady. Now, let's step into one of those quiet rooms for a moment. Not for excitement, for the sound, for the slow motion. A monk sits at a table. The room is cool. The light is dim. A candle flickers. Ink sits in a small cup. A quill scratches parchment. Scratch, scratch, pause, scratch. The pace is slow because writing is slow. Because ink is precious. Because parchment is precious. Because time is precious. And the words are not being written for content, not for views, not for clicks, not for a brand. They're written because someone believes the words matter, or because someone was told to copy them, or because copying itself is a kind of devotion. And you can imagine the calm of it, the focus, the hush, the same small motion repeating, line after line, letter after letter. And again, it's not nothing. It's quiet work. It's the same kind of quiet work as turning the quern stone, just with different tools. Now, back to the village, because most people will never see that writing room. Most people will never hold a book. Their knowledge is spoken, sung, remembered, passed from mouth to ear. So, if you judge the era only by what's written, you miss most of it. And that, again, is the cover-up shape, not a lie, a blind spot. Now, let's move into one of the gentlest, sleepiest sections of all, the long catalog, the grocery list effect. We're going to count and name things slowly, like you're walking through a simple life with a lantern. So, here we go. Rye, oats, barley, wheat, straw, hay, wood, ash, salt, smoke, wool, linen, leather, rope, clay, stone, iron, water, milk, cheese, eggs, beans, onions, herbs, bread, pottage, fire, rain, wind, mud, and then again, rye, oats, barley, wheat. Each word is like a slow step. Each word is like a bead on a string. Now, if you're listening and you feel your thoughts slowing down, that's exactly what this is designed to do. It's why people like history audiobook for sleep. It's why people put on boring history at night. Because the mind stops trying to solve things. It starts to float. Now, let's bring in a small bit of drama again, very lightly. A rumor travels through the village. It comes the way rumors always come, not as a full story, as pieces, as half sentences. As someone saying, I heard there's trouble on the road. I heard the Lord's men are counting livestock again. I heard a village over had a strange sickness. I heard someone saw lights in the sky. And each I heard is like a little pebble dropped into still water. It makes a ripple, not a wave, but a ripple. And then people keep working because fear can't stop the plow. Fear can't grind grain. Fear can't spin wool. So the ripple fades into the background and the body returns to chores. Now, here's a moment that might surprise you. In a slow world, news is both weaker and stronger. Weaker because it takes a long time. Stronger because there is less to distract you from it. So a rumor can sit in your mind for weeks. It can grow roots. It can become a story people repeat by the fire. Now, we won't let it become sharp. We'll let it be soft suspense. The rumor doesn't change the fact that tomorrow comes, and tomorrow brings the same list. So let's return to the daily grind again, but slower than ever. Pre-dawn, cold air, fire low, hands over warmth. Pottage in a bowl, a sip of water, rough cloth on skin, boots pulled on, mud waiting outside, oxen breathing, harness adjusted, plow lifted, field reached, row begun, row continued, row finished, turn at the edge, row begun again, seed scattered, hands emptied, bag lightened, breath visible, wind soft, rain light, work steady, and then midday, and then afternoon, and then the slow slide into evening. Now, evening in this era is not free time. It's not Netflix. It's not scrolling. It's not bright. It's dim. It's calm. It's tired. People sit. They mend. They talk softly. They eat again. The fire is fed again. And then darkness returns, early. And the darkness is not cozy lighting. It's thick. It's complete. It's the kind of dark that makes you respect the candle. So the candle burns, small flame, small circle of light, faces half lit, eyes soft, and someone tells a story. Not a plot twist story, a remembered story, a legend, a saint story, a cautionary tale, a simple tale about a clever animal, a story that has been told so many times the words feel worn smooth, and the smoothness is comforting. Now, if you're listening, you might be wondering, were people bored? Yes. But boredom in this era isn't the same as modern boredom. Modern boredom is often, I have too many options and none feel right. Dark Ages, boredom is the work is the work. It's not emotional drama. It's a steady emptiness where excitement doesn't visit often. And you know what? That kind of boredom can be peaceful because it doesn't pull you in 10 directions. It pulls you in one direction, forward, slowly. Now, let's do something extra sleepy. Let's describe the sound of grain being ground for a long time, as if you're sitting in the room listening. Round and round. Stone whispers against stone, a steady rasp, not loud, just present. A shoulder shifts, a breath, a pause. Then again, round and round, the grain becomes flour slowly, like time itself being ground down into something usable. And while you listen, your eyelids grow heavy because your brain knows this sound, even if you've never heard it in real life. Your brain recognizes repetition. Your brain recognizes safety. Now, let's bring in one more quiet contrarian thought. Because it's important, but we'll say it softly. The biggest cover-up might not be about the Dark Ages at all. It might be about how we think history works. We think history is made by big moments, big battles, big speeches, big inventions. But most history is made by small moments. Small meals, small repairs, small conversations, small acts of endurance. And when you understand that, you understand the Dark Ages in a new way, not as a blank, as a long string of small moments tied together. Now, let's return to the seasonal loop again, because the year is the deepest rhythm. Spring. Mud, planting, summer, heat, flies, swish of scythe, autumn, harvest, smoke, winter, stillness, and repeat, and repeat, and repeat. Now, I'm going to give you another long inventory, but this time it's an inventory of textures. Because textures are soothing to imagine. So, Feel these slowly. Wet mud underfoot, rough wool on skin, warm bowl in hands, soft steam rising from pottage, cold wind on cheeks, smooth wooden spoon, gritty flour dust, sticky dough, dry straw in bedding, warm animal hide, cool stone quern, sharp smell of smoke, damp thatch above, hard earth in the field, soft ash in the hearth, all of it quiet, all of it slow, all of it human. Because as the years turn like this, slow, repetitive, something is happening that people living it might not notice. The world is slowly reconnecting. Roads are slowly used again. Markets slowly grow. Ideas slowly spread. Not like a sudden switch, like dawn. So slow you only notice when it's already light. And that's the real truth about cover-ups and dark ages and missing centuries. Most change is not a boom. It's a creep, a soft shift, a gradual turn. And because it's gradual, it's easy for later people to tell a dramatic story instead. It's easier to say dark and then light. It's easier to tell a sharp story than a slow one. But tonight, we are telling the slow one, because the slow one is true, and the slow one is restful. So if your eyes are closing, let them close. If your thoughts are drifting, let them drift. The candle will keep flickering. The rain will keep tapping the thatch. The quern will keep turning. Round and round. And the village will keep living its quiet life, one soft day after another. Dawn doesn't arrive here like a switch. It arrives like a slow apology from the night. First, the black turns to deep blue. Then deep blue turns to gray. Then gray becomes just enough light to see the shape of a roof. The shape of a tree, the shape of a field that never stops waiting. And that's how change happens in this era too. Not with fireworks, not with headlines. With slow shifts you only notice after they've already happened. Like waking up and realizing your room is brighter than it was 10 minutes ago. You didn't see it happen, but it did. Now, if you're listening in bed and your mind is still holding on to the idea of a cover-up, let it soften. Because what we're uncovering isn't a hidden treasure chest. It's something quieter. It's how people later told the story, how they used one big label, Dark Ages, to describe many different places, many different lives, and many different rhythms. And labels can be lazy. Labels can be loud, labels can erase details. Tonight, we're putting the details back, slowly, like patching a crack in a wall with mud and straw. Press, smooth, pat, now. The village wakes again, not all at once. One door creaks. A dog steps out and sniffs the air like it's reading the news. A chicken complains because chickens always complain. Someone coughs once. Someone else stirs the embers. The fire returns, small and stubborn, and the first smell of the day rises again. Smoke, damp wool, warm grain, life, simple life. Now we drift into the part of the story that's both true and kind of funny, because people today talk about the speed of information. Back then, information had legs, and sometimes those legs were tired. So if something happened 2 villages away, it might as well have happened on the moon. Not because it was impossible to reach, because reaching it takes time, and time is heavy when you're busy. So news arrives slowly. It arrives in pieces. It arrives in the mouth of a traveler, in the gossip of a market, in the sudden appearance of a stranger on a muddy road. And when a stranger appears, people notice, because strangers are rare, and rare things feel important. So imagine this: a figure walking toward the village, not dramatic, not wearing shiny armor, just walking. A cloak damp from mist, boots caked with mud, a bundle on their back. They stop at the edge of the village like they're not sure if they're welcome. And for a moment the air feels different, not dangerous, just alert. Because the village is a small organism and it notices anything new. What do they bring? A warning, a sickness, a message from a lord? A story of war? You can feel the modern brain getting ready for the twist, ready for drama, and then it is boring. They bring a need. They need a place to sleep. They need water. They need food. They need to trade a small piece of cloth for a little grain. That's it. That's the big arrival. A human who is hungry, a human who is tired, a human who wants oats. You can feel the truth again. Most mysteries in history were just people moving through the world trying to survive. Now the traveler sits near the fire. They hold their hands out to warmth. They eat slowly because travel empties you. And they talk, not like a storyteller on a stage, like a person catching their breath. They mention a river crossing that's muddy. They mention a town where a market was bigger than expected. They mention a lord's men counting goods. And the village listens, not because they love excitement, because information is useful. Information is safety. Now, I want to give you a tiny lesson in life in the Middle Ages that feels almost too simple. In a slow world, the most powerful thing is predictability. Predictable seasons, predictable chores, predictable relationships, predictable rules. So anything unpredictable, like a stranger, creates ripples. But the village can't live in ripples. It lives in routine. So after the traveler's story, people go back to work, back to the same list, back to the same loop. And that loop is the lullaby. Now, we're going to do another inventory, this time an inventory of sounds, because sound is what your brain holds on to as you fall asleep. So listen with your imagination. Rain tapping on thatch, wind rubbing straw, fire crackling low, a pot bubbling softly, a spoon scraping wood, stone grinding grain, round and round, a spindle whirring, a baby breathing, a dog sighing, a door creaking, a footstep in mud, a distant crow, one call, then silence, and somewhere far off maybe a bell, one slow tone spreading through damp air. Now, if you're still awake, your mind might try to jump to big history. Okay, but what about kingdoms? What about wars? What about big events? Yes, they happen. But from the peasant's point of view, big events are often just interruptions, like weather. A lord's men come through. They ask questions. They count. They collect. Then they leave. And the field is still there. The mud is still there. The oxen are still breathing, and the next morning still arrives. So big history doesn't feel big from inside it. It feels like a knock on the door while you're stirring pottage. Now let's bring that knock, because this is a good place for a little suspense. A rider arrives. A man on a horse, not a knight with shining armor. Just a rider, a messenger, a collector. Someone who speaks with authority because they represent someone with power. The horse snorts, steam rises from its nose, the rider's cloak is wet, the village watches, quietly. Because everyone has learned this rule, when someone with power arrives, you don't speak first. You wait, you listen, and the rider says something like, "The dues are due," or "The count is being taken," or "The Lord requires," and the sentence hangs like a weight. Now the modern brain might think this is where the story explodes. But again, people bring what they must: a sack of grain, a portion of labor, a simple offering, not because they love it, because the system is the system. And then the rider leaves, hooves pulling away through mud, and the village exhales and goes back to chores, back to monotony, back to the slow work that keeps everyone alive. Now, we're going to do something extra sleepy. We're going to stretch time again. We're going to let the day become a soft blur of repeated actions. So imagine the sun moving across the sky. Not fast, slow. You can't feel minutes. You only feel morning becoming later. The field work continues. Row by row, furrow by furrow, turn at the edge, begin again. Seed scattered, hands empty, big lighter, oxen steady, plod, plod. And in the background, the same quiet details keep happening. Someone mends a strap. Someone sharpens a blade. Someone patches a wall. Someone turns the quern stone round and round. And somewhere, someone is always carrying water, because water is life and water is heavy. Now, let's talk about roads for a moment. Not to wake you up with politics, just to add texture. A Roman road, when it's maintained, is solid. But when big systems shrink, maintenance shrinks too. So some roads become rough. Some bridges weaken. Some paths become seasonal. In summer, a path is dust. In winter, it's mud. In spring, it's mud again. In autumn, it's mud again with leaves stuck in it. And because roads are harder, travel is slower. And because travel is slower, news is slower. And because news is slower, the world feels bigger and quieter. It's like living inside fog. You only see what's close. Everything else is rumor. Now, here's a gentle contrarian twist that matters. When people say the Dark Ages were a time of ignorance, they sometimes forget that a quiet world can still be smart. Smart doesn't always look like books and universities. Smart can look like knowing when to plant without a calendar, knowing how to store grain without plastic, knowing how to keep a fire alive through night, knowing how to read the sky, knowing how to mix mud and straw so it dries strong, knowing which herbs calm a stomach, knowing which stories calm a child. That is intelligence too. It's just not written down in fancy letters. So later, when people only count the written things, they miss the hand knowledge. And that's one of the softest cover-ups of all, not hidden, just overlooked. Now, let's go back inside the home again. Because the home is where your brain wants to rest. And the visuals, if you were watching this as a Dark Ages documentary made for sleep, would already be dimmer now. Warmer, amber, candlelight, no bright whites, no sharp cuts, just slow fades, a single flame, a slow field, a quiet fire, and the sound of rain. So inside, the fire is lower. Someone adds a log. It catches slowly. The pot is simmering again. Pottage again. Yes, again. And if you're thinking, do they ever eat anything else? Sometimes. Sometimes there's vegetables. Sometimes there's a little meat, especially in certain seasons. Sometimes there's fish. Sometimes there's dairy. But the everyday backbone is grain. Because grain stores, grain travels, grain fills bellies. So the taste of life is often bland, warm, filling, boring. And boring is good for sleep. Now, let's do a food inventory. Not fancy food. Peasant food. Bread, dark and dense. Pottage, warm and plain. Onions, sharp and simple. Beans, if they have them. Cabbage, if it grows. Cheese, small pieces. Milk, when it's fresh. Eggs, when chickens cooperate. A little honey sometimes, like a rare sweetness. A small piece of smoked fish. A strip of salted meat in winter when it matters most. And water. Always water. Now while people eat, they talk softly. Not always about big things. Often about small things. Who needs help fixing a fence? Who has a sick animal? Who saw a fox near the coop? Who needs extra hands at harvest? And those conversations are the real web of society. Not royal speeches, not grand declarations, quiet agreements, quiet support, quiet tension too. Because people are people. Now, let's touch that tension gently, like tapping a sleeping shoulder. Village life can be close, too close. Everyone knows your business. Everyone sees if you're struggling. Everyone notices if you have a better cloak, or a fuller sack, or a healthier animal. And when resources are tight, eyes get sharp. So gossip exists. Judgment exists. Jealousy exists. Not because the era is evil, because humans are human. And again, that's part of the cover-up story too. History sometimes paints this era as either purely brutal or purely simple. The truth is mixed. It's kindness and cruelty sharing the same room, like warmth near the fire and cold a few steps away. Now we'll step gently into one more quiet room, the writing room again, because it's important, but we'll keep it calm. Somewhere not far, maybe a monastery, maybe a church. Someone is copying text. Scratch. Scratch. Pause. Scratch. The quill moves, the ink dries, the candle flickers, and a page fills slowly. Now here's the sleepy irony. A lot of what survives from this era survives because someone did a very boring thing for a very long time. Copying. Line by line, letter by letter. No applause, no likes. Just quiet work. And that quiet work becomes the thin thread that connects centuries. So when people say everything was lost, it's not fully true. Some things were carried forward, not quickly, slowly, like a candle flame walking through a long hallway. Now, we go back to the village one more time, and we let the seasonal loop turn again. Spring, thaw, and mud. Summer, heat and flies. Autumn, harvest and smoke. Winter, stillness and long nights. And while that loop turns, the world outside the village is also slowly shifting. Not with sudden drama, with small changes. A slightly busier market, a slightly more used path, a slightly more common traveler, a slightly larger gathering at certain times of year. And because it's slow, most people living it don't say, wow, history is happening. They say, huh, more people came through this year. That's it. That's how big change feels from the insane. Now I'm going to give you the most sleepy kind of suspense, the kind that doesn't jolt you, It's the question that hangs in the air like fog. What will the village become? Will it stay small forever? Will it grow? Will it be swallowed by a bigger system later? Will it be abandoned? Will it survive winter after winter? We don't answer it tonight, not sharply, because the answer is different for every village. Some fade, some grow, some vanish without a trace. Some become towns, some become names on modern maps. And that's the bittersweet part. So many lives pass in these places without leaving a mark. And yet, they are the reason later marks exist at all. Now, let's soothe the mind again with another long list. A list of soft words that keep the tone gentle, heavy, damp, slow, quiet, muffled, thick, warm, low, steady, faint, dim, soft, still, calm. And now a list of actions, small and repetitive: stir, turn, carry, patch, spin, grind, sweep, feed, walk, wait, rest, repeat. Now, if you're still awake, your mind might be trying to finish the story. That's a modern habit. We're trained to want closure, but the Dark Ages are not a neat story. They're a long season. A long stretch of human life where the biggest event for most people was the crops came in, or the roof held, or the baby lived through winter. And that kind of plot doesn't end with a dramatic final scene. It ends with sleep. So let's move into night again. The candle burns low, the fire becomes embers, the pot is empty, the room smells like smoke and warmth. Outside, the village is almost silent. Snow, maybe. Rain, maybe. Wind, definitely. And in the dark, a person lies down on straw. They pull a wool blanket up. Their body is tired in a clean way, a work-tired way, not an anxious tired way. And their thoughts slow, not because they learned mindfulness, because the day used them up. And that's another contrarian thought whispered gently. Sometimes the reason modern people can't sleep isn't because we're weak. It's because our tiredness is different. Our bodies sit still, but our minds run. Back then, bodies worked hard. And when bodies work hard, minds often follow into rest. So in a strange way, the Dark Ages teach something simple. Rest is natural when life is rhythmic, when it repeats, when it's predictable, when the day ends without a bright screen begging for attention. Now, we bring the title back again, like a soft recap. What was history's biggest cover-up? Maybe it wasn't a hidden secret. Maybe it was the way we've been taught to see value. We've been taught that big is important. But the Dark Ages remind us that small is the real foundation. So if you came into this video thinking the Dark Ages were a blank gap, now you know they were full of quiet life, full of repeated chores, full of mud, grain, wool, fire, and weather, full of people living at the pace of a tired horse. And if you came in thinking there must be a conspiracy, now you know the real mystery is simpler. Silence, fewer records, more oral life, more hand knowledge, less spotlight. And maybe that's not sinister. Maybe it's restful. Now we continue, because we're not at the final fade yet, but we're getting closer. We're moving deeper into the monotone, the dim, the repetitive. The place where you can finally stop trying to hold on to thoughts. So let the next sounds carry you. Rain on thatch, fire crackling low, stone against stone, round and round, a spindle turning, whir, whir, and you're breathing slow and steady, in, out, in, out. This is history for sleep. This is boring history. This is how you fall asleep to history. A calm, simple story told in a slow voice. Like bedtime stories for adults, like a history audiobook for sleep that doesn't ask anything from you. Just rest and let the village stay quiet and let the centuries keep turning slowly, softly, over and over. The night keeps its promise. It stays. It lingers. It presses softly against the thatched roof like a hand resting on a sleeping child's shoulder. And inside the home, the fire shrinks down into a quieter version of itself. Not flames anymore, just embers. A faint orange glow, like the last bit of sunset trapped in ash. Someone pokes it with a stick. A small spark jumps. Not dramatic, just enough to say, "I'm still here." And you realize something that feels almost too simple to say out loud. In the daily life in the dark ages, still here is the whole victory. Still here after winter, still here after sickness. Still here after bad weather. Still here after a hungry year. Still here after the world outside the village shifts. Even if you don't fully understand it. Still here. Now, if you're listening in bed right now, let that phrase relax you. Still here. You don't have to solve anything tonight. You don't have to catch up. You don't have to prove anything. Still here is enough. And that's the heartbeat of this History for Sleep story. Now, we're going to sink into the most hypnotic section of all. The long inventory, the slow catalog, the part that feels like counting sheep, except the sheep are sacks of grain and the fence posts are chores. This is the part of boring history that helps you fall asleep to history. The part that turns a Dark Ages documentary into a lullaby. So imagine the village again, but dimmer now. Not the bright, interesting opening, not the foggy ruins and maps. We're deeper. We're in sleep mode. Everything is warm-toned. Amber, deep brown, soft shadows. The candlelight makes the corners of the room feel far away, like they're not even in the same building. And in the center of the room is the little circle of life. Fire, pot, bowl, hands, breath. Now, here comes the first list. A list of materials. Because in a world without plastic, without factories, without quick shipping, materials matter. They're not background. They're the whole reality. So, wood, stone, clay, iron, wool, linen, leather, rope, straw, mud, ash, salt, smoke, water. Each one is a chapter. Each one is a job. Each one is a sound. Now, let's take them slowly. Wood. Wood is everywhere. Your walls, your roof beams, your stool, your table, your spoon, your tool handles. Wood creaks when you step. Wood groans when it's loaded. Wood swells when it's damp. Wood shrinks when it dries. Wood is alive even when it's dead. And because it's alive, it changes. So you maintain it. You tighten, you patch, you replace. Stone. Stone is heavy, stubborn, honest. Stone is your quern. Stone is your sharpening surface. Stone is the foundation under the hearth. Stone doesn't hurry. Stone just exists. And when stone rubs against stone, you get that sleepy sound again. Round and round. Clay. Clay is your pot, your cup, your jar. Clay holds your soup. Clay holds your salt. Clay holds your water. Clay breaks if you drop it. So you don't drop it. Or if you do, you sigh and you try to repair what you can. Iron. Iron is precious. Not rare exactly, but valuable. Iron is your knife edge, your hook, your nail. Your small, hard pieces of strength. Iron is what turns a simple tool into a tool that lasts longer. But iron isn't everywhere, shiny and easy. It's worked for. It's maintained. It's sharpened. It rusts if you ignore it. So you don't ignore it. Wool. Wool is warmth. Wool is clothing. Wool is blankets. Wool is the difference between I can sleep and I can't. Wool takes work, shearing, washing, carding, spinning, weaving. Wool is a whole chain of chores, and every step has a rhythm. Linen is cleaner, lighter, not always available for everyone, but if you have it, it's valued. Linen is the feel of something smoother on skin. Leather is straps, belts, shoe, harness. Leather is the practical skin of the animal living on after the animal is gone. Rope is tying, hanging, pulling, binding. Rope is a tool you don't notice until you need it. Straw is bedding. Straw is roof. Straw is insulation. Straw is the crack filler in winter. Mud is road. Mud is wall. Mud is floor. Mud is the texture of the era. Ash is the leftover of warmth. Ash is what you scrape out. Ash is what you step in. Ash is what tells you the fire was here. Salt is preservation. Salt is winter insurance. Salt is serious. Smoke is flavor. Smoke is preservation. Smoke is also annoyance. It stings eyes. It clings to cloth. But smoke is part of life. Water is heavy. Water is everywhere. And yet, water must be carried, and carried, and carried. Now, you might be thinking, okay, that's a lot of stuff. Yes, and that's the point. When people say the Dark Ages were empty, they forget the stuff. They forget the material reality that fills every hour. They forget that most of life is not abstract ideas. It's carrying water. It's patching roofs. It's stirring soup. It's grinding grain. It's making warmth last. And when you think about that long enough, you start to feel the contrarian truth again. This era isn't blank. It's full. It's just full of things historians don't always celebrate. Now, let's move into the next inventory, the chores. And we're going to treat the chores like a slow poem, not a dramatic poem, a dull poem, a comforting dull poem, because this is bland history by design. So, wake. Stir the embers. Feed the fire, warm your hands, eat pottage, drink water, check the animals, feed the animals, clean a little, carry water, turn the quern, round and round, knead dough, patch the wall, mud and straw, smooth it, pat it. Card wool, spin wool, pull, twist, wrap, mend clothing, sharpen the blade, check the fence, walk to the field, guide the oxen, plod, scratch the soil, row by row, furrow by furrow, turn at the edge, begin again, return home, eat again, feed the fire, sit, listen to wind, listen to rain, sleep, and then wake again. Now, I want to ask you a question gently. When was the last time you had a day like that? A day that was only a few things, only a few repeated motions. A day without 10 different tabs open in your mind. A day without the feeling that you should be doing something else. It's rare now, isn't it? We live in a time of choices. So many choices that they become noise. But in this era, choice is narrow. And narrow choice can be exhausting. Yes, but narrow choice can also be calming. Because it removes the constant question, what should I do? You do what you must do, and then you rest. Now, the next list is the inventory inside the home. We've done some of it, but now we go deeper. Because the deeper we go, the sleepier it gets. So imagine the candlelight moving across objects, a slow pan, like the camera is drifting, not cutting. It's just slow, gentle movement. You see a wooden peg holding a cloak, a small shelf with a clay jar, a bag of grain tied with rope, a second bag smaller, a bundle of dried herbs, maybe for flavor, maybe for sickness, maybe for comfort, a bowl with a chip, a spoon with a notch, a strip of cloth used as a rag, a needle stuck through a piece of wool so it doesn't get lost, a spindle resting still for now, a quernstone with flour dust around it like a pale halo, a broom made from twigs, leaning in the corner, a small pile of kindling, a larger log saved for later, a bucket near the door, damp, a little line of smoke rising to the roof hole, and you notice something else. The home is not decorated for beauty, it's arranged for survival. Everything is within reach, everything is used, nothing is just for looks. And if something is pretty, it's usually pretty by accident. Because human hands made it, and human hands sometimes make things pleasing without trying. Now, let's talk about the wall again, because it's one of the most quietly fascinating parts of life in the Middle Ages. Wattle and daub. It sounds like a silly rhyme, wattle and daub, like a children's song. But it's a real technology, a real skill. And it's also deeply boring, which is why it belongs here. Wattle is the woven lattice. Thin branches, flexible, crossed, and tucked like a basket. Daub is the mud mixture. Mud, straw, water, sometimes manure. The straw gives structure. The manure helps bind and dry. And someone stands there, hands covered, pressing it into the lattice. Smearing, smoothing, pressing again. And the motion is slow and repetitive. It's like frosting a cake, but the cake is a wall and the frosting is mud. And nobody claps when you finish. They just feel less wind. And honestly, less wind is a big reward. Now, let's move to another deeply boring process. Candle making, because if you want light, you have to make it. There's no switch, there's no bulb, so you gather fat, animal fat, you render it, you melt it, you pour it, you make tallow candles, and tallow candles smell like what they are, not perfume, life, work, animals. But that tiny flame is precious anyway, because it pushes back the huge dark. It creates a small circle where faces can be seen, where hands can work, where a story can be told. Now pause and notice how perfect that is for a sleep channel. We're literally talking about light shrinking, about the world getting dim, about the brain receiving fewer signals, less stimulation, more darkness, more calm. This is why a relaxing history documentary can actually help sleep, because the theme matches what the body wants at night. Dimness, softness, repetition, safety. Now, let's bring in one more list, and this time it's a list of things that take time, because time is the real currency here. time and labor. So, grinding grain, spinning wool, weaving cloth, patching walls, cutting wood, carrying water, walking to fields, guiding oxen, waiting for seeds to grow, waiting for weather, waiting for harvest, waiting through winter, waiting for dawn. Everything is waiting with work inside it. Now, here comes a small suspense thread again, because some people look at this and say, how did anyone not lose their mind? Fair. So, here's the quiet answer. People did what humans always do. They filled the gaps with stories, with songs, with belief, with humor, with routine. And they also didn't have our modern expectation that life should be exciting. That expectation is new. Back then, exciting was sometimes another word for dangerous. So a quiet day was a good day. A boring day was a safe day. And that flips our modern mindset, doesn't it? We chase excitement. They endured it. We want novelty. They wanted predictability. And you can feel how that difference changes the whole emotional tone of the era. Now, let's bring in the cover-up question again, but ask it like a whisper. What was history's biggest cover-up? Maybe it was the way later centuries made this era look like a joke, like a dull, backward time, because it's easier to mock what you don't understand. It's easier to say dark than to say slow. It's easier to say ignorant than to say skilled in a different way. It's easier to say nothing happened than to admit you don't know what ordinary people did all day. So the cover-up might be laziness. Storytelling laziness, not evil, just lazy. And if you've ever been misunderstood because someone didn't take time to see your full story, you already know how that feels. Now, we drift into the next section, the monotone history section. The part that intentionally slows even more. Fewer sharp consonants, more soft words, more heavy, damp phrases. So let's slow the voice. Let's soften the shape of sentences. Let's make them shorter, like footsteps, slow footsteps, in mud, heavy, damp, quiet. Now we go back to the field again, because the field is the ultimate repetition. The field is the endless loop. The field is where time becomes visible. In rows, in furrows, in footprints. So you walk out, mist sits low, the air tastes wet, your cloak is damp at the edges, your boots sink slightly. The oxen are waiting, they always seem to be waiting. Patient, large, warm, breathing. You touch one, briefly. A steady hand on warm hide. Then you fit the harness, straps, buckles, rope. You check them, because a broken strap is a disaster. Then you lift the plow, the ardiste, the scratch plow. You set it. And the oxen begin, plod, plod. The wood creaks, the earth tears softly, not loud, just a low rip. And you guide the line. Not perfect, just straight enough, row by row, furrow by furrow, turn at the edge, begin again. Now here's the sleepy part. Imagine doing that for hours. No music, no podcast, no motivational speech, just the sound of breath, the sound of wood, the sound of soil, and your own thoughts, if you have energy for them, or no thoughts at all. Because sometimes the best part of hard work is that your mind becomes quiet. Now, let's step away from the field and follow someone else's day. Because while one person plows, another person is inside turning grain into food. They stand at the quern stone. They pour grain into the center. They grip the top stone. They turn round, round, round. The stone scrapes. The grain breaks down. Flour gathers, slow, steady, round, round. Now, if you've ever tried to stay awake while listening to a steady, repetitive sound, you know how hard it is. Because the brain likes rhythm. It relaxes into it. It stops scanning for surprises. So round and round becomes a lullaby. Now, another person is spinning wool. They sit near the fire because fingers work better when warm. They draw fibers out. They twist. They let the spindle hang and spin, pulling the thread into strength. Pull, twist, wrap, pull, twist, wrap. The spindle turns like a tiny planet, and the thread grows so unsteady. Now, if you're listening, your breathing might be copying it. Slow, steady. Now, let's move into the grocery list effect again because it's so effective for sleep. This time, we'll list tools and chores together, like you're walking around the room naming what you see. Plow, oxen, harness, rope, yoke, hoe, abdomen, sickle, scythe, rake, basket, bucket, pot, ladle, bowl, spoon, quernstone, spindle, carding comb, needle, thread, wool, linen, leather, straw, mud, daub, wattle, firewood, ash, salt, smoke, water, carry, stir, turn, grind, spin, patch, sweep, walk, wait, sleep. Now let's add the season again, because the season is always present like a second character. Spring, wet, thaw, mud returns like it never left. Planting begins. Hands cold, soil soft, summer, heat, flies, long light, work stretches, haymaking, scythe moving, swish, swish, autumn, harvest, relief mixed with worry, smoke in the air, food stored, winter, long dark, stillness huddling close to warmth, wind outside, quiet, and then spring again, and then summer again, and then autumn again, and then winter again. Now, here's a gentle question. Do you see how this becomes hypnotic? How it becomes a loop your mind can ride like a slow boat. That's why people love bedtime stories for adults that are repetitive and calm. That's why history audiobook for sleep works when it's not trying to shock you. That's why calm narration history is a real thing. Because the mind wants a safe pattern at night, and the dark ages are a safe pattern if you don't frame them as horror. Now, we add a tiny spark of curiosity, just enough to keep the listener from snapping awake, but not enough to excite them. Here's the spark. If the world was so slow, how did change ever happen? How did we get from this candlelit room to bright electric cities? How did we go from quernstones to machines? How did we go from rumors carried by tired feet to news traveling instantly? Good questions. And the answer is slowly. So slowly that it doesn't feel like a story while it's happening. It feels like a slightly busier road, a slightly bigger market, a slightly different tool, a slightly new idea, one traveler who brings a new method, one craftsperson who improves a blade, one community that builds a stronger bridge, and those little shifts stack up like straw bundles on a roof, one by one, until you look up one day and realize the roof is thicker than it used to be. Now, let's step into the writing room again, because it's a perfect sleepy image. A monk sits at a table, the candlelight flickers, the quill scratches, scratch, scratch, pause, scratch. The page fills slowly. And this is one of the quiet ironies of history. The era we call dark is partly preserved by people doing extremely boring work in dim rooms. Copying, praying, tending gardens, making ink, feeding fires, maintaining libraries, quietly, steadily. So yes, some knowledge shrank in certain places, but some knowledge also stayed alive, like a candle protected from wind. Now back in the village, most people never touch that world of books. Their world is spoken, oral, stories, songs, skills passed by watching. So the blankness in written history is partly because the truth of peasant life wasn't written down. It was lived, and lived things vanish. Which brings us back to the most unsettling thought of all. Unsettling, but also strangely peaceful. Most of the humans who ever existed are invisible to us now. Not because they were worthless. Because time is thick and forgetful. So if there is a cover-up, it might simply be time itself. Time covers everything, softly, patiently, like snow covering a field. Now breathe, slow, steady. Now we go into a longer inventory, this time an inventory of a year, month by month, but without modern month names, because modern months feel too sharp, too calendar-like. We'll do it by feeling. Early spring. Cold mud, careful planting, wet hems. Late spring, green shoots, more birds, slightly warmer hands. Early summer, long days, growing grain, buzzing flies. High summer, sweat, hay, scythe swish, aching shoulders. Late summer, watching the fields, waiting, checking. Early autumn, harvest begins. Relief, busy hands. Late autumn, smoke, salting, storing. Darker evenings. Early winter. First deep cold. More time inside. More mending. Midwinter, stillness, wind, long nights, low voices. Late winter, patience wearing thin, firewood counting, waiting for thaw. And then, early spring again. A loop, a wheel. Now we add the inventory list that's almost pure lullaby. Just words, just objects, just chores. Rye, oats, barley, wheat, bread, pottage, fire, ash, smoke, water, bucket, bowl, spoon, pot, quern, stone, wool, spindle, thread, needle, cloak, straw, thatched roof, mud wall, wattle, daub, oxen, plow, field, furrow, row, seed, rain, wind, fog, silence. Now, if you're drifting, drift. If you're awake, keep listening. Because now we move into the soft suspense of the missing centuries again, without turning it into a loud conspiracy. Some people look back at this era and say, why does it feel quiet? And that question is real. There are fewer records from certain places and times. There are fewer grand monuments in some regions. There's less of that Roman-style paperwork machine, so the timeline looks thin. And when the timeline looks thin, modern minds want an explanation. So they imagine a cover-up, a plot, a secret edit. But the simple answer is often the true one. Big institutions fell apart in parts of the West. Cities shrank in some places. Trade networks changed, and fewer people wrote things down. That's it. Silence. Not a villain, just fewer ink-stained hands. And if you accept that, you can stop hunting for a shadowy enemy and start seeing the ordinary people again. And the ordinary people are the heart of this story. Now, let's add one more gentle emotional beat. Imagine someone in this village, an older person who has seen many winters. They sit near the fire. Their hands are busy with something small, mending, spinning, carving. They don't talk much, not because they're cold, because words are saved here, and a child sits near them, watching, learning without being taught. And in that quiet moment, you can see the real history, not kings, not battles, a skill passing from one set of hands to another, a tiny inheritance, a thread of life continuing. That is history. That is the kind of history that doesn't make it into textbooks, the kind that gets covered up by time and by loud storytelling. Now we move back to the home again, because at this point in the video, the visuals would already be fading darker, the motion would be minimal, a field with only grass tips moving, a fire with only flame flicker, a candle with only a tiny sway. The goal is to help eyes close, not open. So imagine the candle, a single flame in darkness, and the sound of rain, steady, soft, and someone's voice, mine, speaking slowly like a blanket being laid down. This is monotone history in the kindest sense, not robotic, not flat, just steady, like walking, like grinding grain, like spinning wool, like breathing. Now, I'm going to ask you a question that you don't have to answer. It's just a soft thought. What if the biggest cover-up in history is not about the past, but about the present? What if we've been trained to believe that only loud things matter? Only big achievements, only viral moments, only visible success? And what if that's wrong? What if most of life, good life, is quiet, repetitive, humble? Like patching a wall, like stirring soup, like showing up again tomorrow. If that thought makes you feel calmer, hold it loosely. If it makes you sad, let it pass. We're not here to wrestle with feelings tonight. We're here to let the mind slow down. Now, let's drift into another long list. This one is a list of tiny village problems, because tiny problems are the texture of the days. A roof leak, a broken strap, a dull blade, a cracked pot, a sick chicken, a fence post leaning, a cartwheel stuck, a bag of grain dampening, a child with a cough, a tooth that aches, a fire that won't catch, a candle that burns too fast, a boot sole wearing thin. And each problem is solved slowly, not with a store run, with hands, with neighbors, with patience. Now, a list of tiny village solutions. Patch the roof with straw, tie the strap with rope, sharpen the blade on stone, repair the pot if possible, or trade for another. Move the fence post and pack the soil. Dry the grain near warmth. Boil water, chew herbs, hold a warm cloth, pray quietly, wait, and continue. What happens when a bad year comes? When the harvest fails? When sickness visits? When winter bites too hard? People do what they always do. They tighten, they ration, they share, if they can. They endure, they lose some, they keep going. It's not a movie plot, it's a human plot. And the human plot is always the same. Try, fail, try again. Now we return to the seasonal loop one more time because loops are sleepy. Spring, planting, mud, summer, hay, bush, heat, autumn, harvest, smoke, winter, dark, stillness, and repeat and repeat. Now, to keep you gently curious, here's another tiny spark. If this era is so quiet, why do we remember it at all? Because of two things. First, later people needed a story. They needed a before that made their now feel brighter, so they painted the past as dark. Second, even in quiet times, some things stand out. A battle here, a king there, a monastery copying texts, a new tool, a new method, a new connection. But those standout moments are like stars. They are not the whole sky. They are points of light in a massive darkness of ordinary life. And the darkness isn't evil. It's just everything that wasn't recorded. Now we go softer again. We go back to the fire. The fire is low. The room is dim. A person is grinding grain. Round and round, stone against stone, someone else is spinning wool. Pull, twist, wrap. Wind touches the thatch outside. Rain taps. Soft. The village is quiet. The mind is quieting too. Now, let's do one more list. This one is almost a lullaby of verbs. Stir, warm, carry, turn, grind, spin, mend, patch, sweep, feed, walk, plod, scratch, scatter, wait, listen, rest, sleep. Now breathe in, out. And as you breathe, remember the title again because we're still inside it. What was history's biggest cover-up? Not a hidden vault, not a secret council, not a dramatic edit, just silence. And the silence was made of mud and straw and grain and wool and smoke. The silence was made of millions of ordinary people doing ordinary work in a slow world. And the cover-up was simply that later storytellers didn't find that ordinary life glamorous enough to describe. But we are describing it tonight, slowly, softly, on purpose, so you can rest. Now, if you're still awake, I'll leave you with one more gentle question before we sink even deeper next time. If your whole life were this simple, work, warmth, food, rest, what would your mind do? Would it finally stop racing? Would it finally be quiet? Or would it start telling stories louder than ever? We don't answer it. We just let it float, like smoke rising to the roof. And now we return to the quiet. Rain, fire, stone, round and round, thread, pull, twist, wrap, and you're breathing slow, steady, heavy, damp, quiet, muffled, thick, warm, low, still, calm. And if you drift off right here, that is the most historically accurate ending of all. The smoke rises the same way it always does. It doesn't rush. It doesn't flare. It just lifts, thin and patient, toward the dark gap in the roof and disappears into the night like a thought you don't need anymore. And if you're listening in bed, that's your cue. Let a few thoughts rise. Let them drift. Let them go. Because the dark ages, this slow, candlelit, the stretch of time, doesn't ask you to think fast. It asks you to think soft, to think in circles, to think in simple things, to think in the kind of calm that makes your eyelids heavier without you noticing. Now, tonight, we go deeper into the quiet, not into a shocking secret, into a deeper layer of ordinary life. The layer that history books often skip because it's not dramatic enough. The layer that becomes perfect, boring history for sleep. So imagine the village again, but dimmer. The edges blur a little. as if fog moved into your mind too. You can still see the circle of firelight though. You can still hear the rain on thatch. You can still feel the steady rhythm of a slow world. And in that circle of firelight, somebody is doing the most common kind of human work. They're repairing something, not making something brand new. Repairing, because in this era, nothing is wasted if it can be fixed. A strap has frayed, so they twist new fibers into it. They pull, they knot, they tighten. Slow hands, steady hands, and the strap becomes usable again. A small victory, a quiet one. Now, let's move to another repair. A boot sole is wearing thin, not fashionably distressed. Actually thin. Thin enough that cold and wet can start creeping in. So someone sits head down with leather, they cut, they stitch, they press, they add a patch. The needle moves slowly because leather resists. Push, pull, push, pull. The thread tightens. The boot becomes safer, not perfect, safer, and safer is enough. Now, I want you to notice what we're doing. We're not chasing a plot. We're drifting through the maintenance layer of history. The maintenance layer is invisible in most stories, but it's the layer that keeps people alive. It's the layer that holds up the whole society. And the funny thing is, it's also the layer that helps people sleep, because maintenance is repetitive, predictable, calm, and that's what your brain wants at night. Now, let's do a slow inventory of repairs, like we're walking through a quiet day and naming what breaks and what gets fixed. A strap, a buckle, a boot sole, a torn sleeve, a cracked pot handle, a loose roof bundle, a fence post leaning, a rope fraying, a cartwheel wobbling, a wooden peg coming loose, a basket splitting, a tool handle cracking, a quern stone needing cleaning, a spindle needing smoothing, a cloak edge needing stitching, a wall crack needing fresh daub, and for each one, a slow solution. Tie, patch, stitch, sharpen, smooth, press mud into the gap, tuck straw into the roof, pack soil around the fence post, wrap rope around the weak spot, turn the wheel and listen for the wobble. Fix, fix, fix. Quiet work. Now, here's a gentle question, asked softly so it doesn't wake you. When did life become so disposable? When did repair become less normal than replace? Because in this era, repair is not a hobby, it's the default. And the Dark Ages, this so-called dark time, actually hides a bright little truth. People were resourceful, not because it was trendy, because it was necessary. So if anyone ever tries to paint this period as nothing but ignorance, you can remember this scene. A person repairing a boot by firelight. That's intelligence too. Different intelligence. Hand intelligence. Survival intelligence. Now, we drift outside again. Not because we need a new scene, because the loop continues. The outside air is damp. Fog rests on the field like it's tired too. The path from home to field is soft and uneven. Mud gives slightly under each step, and there's a sound you can hear from far away. A soft, slow, rhythmic sound. Not music, work. Somebody chopping wood. Thok, thok, thok. Not fast, not angry, steady. And that sound carries across the village because there's nothing louder to compete with it. Now, wood matters more than most modern people can imagine. Wood is heat. Wood is cooking. Wood is light. Because it keeps the fire alive. And the fire keeps the candle flame from feeling alone. So chopping wood is not a side task. It's a core task. It's part of the winter plan. And winter plans are serious, so the axe rises, falls, Thok. A log splits. A piece is set aside. The rhythm repeats. Thok, thok. And slowly, the pile grows. Now, if you're listening for sleep, let that sound become a metronome. Not loud, not sharp. Soft. Thok, thok, thok. And between the chops, the wind breathes through straw roofs. A hush. Now, inside another home, someone is doing another slow task. Making bread. Not fancy bread. Dense bread. Dark bread. Bread that feels like a brick in your hand, but a warm brick that keeps you alive. They mix flour, made from ors at the quern, with water. A bit of salt, if they have it. Maybe a bit of sour starter, if they keep one. They knead, push, fold, push, fold. The dough resists, then softens. They shape it, they bake it near the fire, and the smell, oh, the smell fills the room. Not sweet bakery smell, a deeper smell. Grain, smoke, warmth. A smell that says, you can make it through another day. Now, this is where a modern mind might suddenly think, that actually sounds nice. And yes, that's the contrarian point again. The Dark Ages weren't only hardship. They were also simple comforts, concentrated. Warm bread, a stable fire, a blanket, a story told softly. And sometimes, simple comforts land harder than modern luxuries because they come after real work. Now, let's step into the story by firelight again. Because humans don't live on grain alone. They live on meaning too. So someone tells a tale, and the tale is not delivered like a performance. It's delivered like habit. A story the teller has heard since they were small. A story about a traveler who got lost. A story about a fox that tricked a farmer. A story about a saint who protected a village. A story about a strange light seen over a hill. And as the story is told, the room listens in the half-sleep way people listen when the day has been long. The children's eyes droop. The adults' faces soften, the fire crackles, the rain taps, and the story becomes part might of the night. Like smoke. Now, here's a small, wattle suspense thread, because sometimes the story is about danger. A warning tale, no, don't wander too far at night. Don't go near the marsh in fog. Don't trust strangers too easily. And in the modern world, we might laugh. But in this era, those tales are practical, because fog can hide a ditch. A ditch can break a leg. A broken leg can change everything. So the story is not just entertainment. It's safety wrapped in words. And that's another hidden layer of intelligence. Quiet intelligence. Oral intelligence. Now, let's drift toward another place where quiet knowledge survives. A garden. Yes, a garden. Not a pretty garden for photos. A small practical patch of earth near a home or monastery. Herbs, onions, cabbage, maybe beans. Plants that can survive. Plants that matter. And someone kneels there, hands in soil. They pull weeds, they check leaves, they pick what is ready, they carry it back. A small basket, a small harvest, a small addition to pottage. Now, let's do a list of herbs because lists are sleepy. Sage, thyme, mint, parsley, yarrow, chamomile, garlic, onion, not always all of these, not everywhere. But the idea is the same. Small plants, small help, small comfort. Now I want to say something softly because it's important and it adds value without waking you. The Dark Ages weren't a time when people didn't know anything. They knew plenty. They just knew it differently. They knew it in hands, in seasons, in plants, in tools, in weather. They knew it without textbooks. And if later historians ignore that kind of knowledge, the past looks emptier than it really was. That's the cover-up shape again. A quiet erasing, not a secret plot. A perspective problem. Now, let's step into the slow travel again. A person walks a road, not a highway. A track. Dirt, ruts, puddles, sometimes stones, sometimes deep mud. The person walks carefully because a twisted ankle is not a minor inconvenience. It's serious. So they step, slow, they carry a bundle, maybe a message, maybe goods, maybe nothing but themselves. And as they walk, they pass fields, small homes, a stand of trees, a stream, and because the world is quiet, the sound of the stream is loud enough to be noticed. Water moving over stones, soft, constant, calming. Now, here's the subtle trick. You might have come here for history's biggest cover-up, but what you're getting is a world where your nervous system can finally loosen, because everything is slow enough to feel safe. Everything is predictable enough to stop scanning for danger. This is why people search for fall asleep to history content. Why they want calm narration history. Why they put on a history audiobook for sleep instead of something loud. Because the mind loves slow rivers, and this era is a river. Now, let's go into the work that might be the most boring of all. Laundry. Yes, laundry. Because clothing gets dirty. Clothing gets smoky. Clothing gets muddy, and washing is not a quick button push. It's labor. Water must be carried. Heated sometimes. Cloth must be scrubbed, wrung out, hung. It dries slowly in damp air. So someone stands near water, hands red from cold, rubbing cloth on a rough surface. Scrub, scrub, rinse, wring, scrub, rinse, wring. A steady motion, not glamorous, not recorded, but real. Now, if your eyelids are heavy, let them be heavy, because we're sinking into the deepest monotony now. The kind that lulls, the kind that slows breathing, the kind that makes your thoughts blur. Now we shift to another deeply boring process. Making thread into cloth. Weaving. A loom. Wooden frame. Thread stretched tight. A shuttle moving. Back and forth, back and forth. The sound is soft. Thup, slide, thup, slide. The cloth grows slowly, like daylight creeping in. One line at a time. And again, this is not nothing. This is production. This is skill. This is patience made visible. Now, here's a gentle joke, because even sleepy stories can smile. Imagine someone watching weaving and saying, "If the cloth grows any slower, we'll have to start wearing imagination." And someone else answers, "Good, it's lighter." Quiet humor, soft humor, the kind that doesn't jar you awake. Now we return to the biggest sleepy tool of all, the list. This time, a list of people in a village, not named as individuals, but as roles. A farmer, a herder, a spinner, a weaver, a woodcutter, a potter, a smith, if the village has one nearby, a baker, a healer sometimes, a priest or monk, depending on the place, a child carrying water, an older person mending cloth, a person watching animals, a person patching a wall. And each role is not a job title. It's a set of repeated motions. So the village becomes a machine made of habits. And habits are calming. Now, let's step into the smith's corner for a moment. Not for sparks and excitement, for rhythm. A smith heats iron. The fire glows. The metal warms. The smith lifts it, places it on an anvil, and taps. Not wild hammering like in movies. Measured taps. Tap, tap, tap. The iron shifts shape. The tool becomes sharper. Then the metal goes back to heat. Then back to taps. Tap, tap, tap. A slow transformation. Now, I want you to notice how everything in this world works like that. Warm, work, repeat. Warm, work, repeat. It's the same pattern as seasons. It's the same pattern as day and night. It's loops all the way down. And loops are sleep. Now let's bring in a soft mystery again. Just to keep a tiny spark alive, the phrase dark ages makes people think of a big shadow, a big void. But what if the biggest shadow wasn't over the era? What if the biggest shadow was over our understanding of the era? Because when you shine a spotlight only on kings and wars, you leave everything else in shadow. And then later, you call the shadow darkness, as if the era itself was the problem. But the problem might be the spotlight. The spotlight is narrow. The spotlight is picky. The spotlight doesn't like mud. So the cover-up, again, is not a villain. It's a habit, a storytelling habit. Now, let's sink back into pure sensory calm. The texture of a wool blanket, rough but warm. The smell of smoke and hair, the taste of plain porridge, the warmth of fire on cheeks, the cold air near the door, the sound of rain, the quiet scratch of a quill somewhere far away, the soft rasp of stone on stone, round and round. Now, let's follow an entire boring hour, not a dramatic hour. Just an hour. A person sits near the fire and cards wool. They drag combs through fleece. Again, again, again. Fibers align. Hands repeat. The mind empties. In the background, someone turns the quern. Round and round, a child yawns, a dog shifts, outside wind moves the thatch. Inside the fire pops softly, and the hour passes without any big event. And that is the point. Now we drift into the seasonal anxiety again, but softly, because even in calm routine there's a constant awareness. Food must last. Winter must be met. So people count. They count grain. They count firewood. They count salted meat. They count candles. They count how many days until planting. How many days until harvest? How many weeks until thaw? Counting is a kind of prayer. So let's count with them, slowly. 1 sack of rye. 2, 3. 1 sack of oats, 2, 1 sack of barley, 1 small sack of wheat, 1 bundle of dried fish, 1 jar of salt, 1 pile of firewood, 1 smaller pile for kindling, 1 candle, another candle stub. And when the counting is done, the mind settles because it knows the shape of survival. Now, I want to offer another small piece of value, simple and clear. The Dark Ages were not a single block of darkness. They were different in different places. Some areas had more trade, some had more writing, some had more stability, some had more conflict. But the feel of daily life for ordinary people often had the same core: work, weather, and waiting. Work, weather, waiting. That's the 3-part lullaby. Now, we move toward a deeper emotional beat, not sadness like an alarm, just a slow tenderness. Imagine a person, an ordinary person, who never travels more than a few miles from home. They live, they work, they raise children, they bury someone they love, they laugh sometimes, they worry sometimes. They see the same fields, the same path, The same roofs, the same firelight for decades. Then they die. No book records their name. No statue holds their face. But their work mattered because their work fed someone else. Their hands built warmth that kept others alive. Their quiet choices shaped a child who shaped another child. They are history, even if we can't point to them on a page. And if that thought feels heavy, let it become gentle instead, because it means you don't need fame to matter. You can be ordinary, you can be quiet, you can be slow, and still be real, still be important. Now we return to the night again, because this script is meant to guide you into rest. The candle burns down, the fire becomes embers, the room grows darker. The faces blur, the world becomes sound and warmth and breath, and the words become softer. Now, let's do one more long, sleepy inventory. This one is the cleanest grocery list effect. Rye, oats, barley, wheat, bread, pottage, water, salt, smoke, ash, wood, straw, mud, wool, linen, leather, rope, pot, bowl, spoon, quern, stone, spindle, thread, needle, cloak, boots, oxen, plow, field, row, furrow, seed, rain, wind, fog, fire, embers, sleep. What happens next? Not tomorrow, not next week, in the long run? Does this slow world stay slow, or does it begin to speed up? And the answer is, it speeds up eventually, but not like a sudden drum roll, like dawn, like a candle lighting another candle, one connection at a time, one road used more often, one market getting slightly bigger, one tool slightly improved, one idea traveling a little farther. So if you're waiting for the big dramatic reveal, the reveal is change is boring too. Change is slow. Change is stacked small steps. And that's the real history. Not always the highlight reel. Before, you may have pictured a blank gap, a mysterious missing chapter, a world that stopped. Now, you know the quiet truth. The cover-up wasn't a secret plot. It was a storytelling habit that ignored ordinary life. And ordinary life is what filled those centuries. Mud, grain, wool, fire, weather, and the slow endurance of millions. So if you came for conspiracy, you got something better. You got calm. You got silence. You got a place to rest your mind. Now, for the last stretch of this section, we'll do something very simple. We'll walk through one more day, but as softly as possible, like the day is already fading into a dream. Pre-dawn, cold air, fire low, hands warm, bowl lifted, pottage tasted, warm, bland, filling, boots pulled on, door opened, mud waiting, oxen breathing, harness checked, plow lifted, field reached, row begun, furrow made, row continued, turn at edge, begin again, seed scattered, hands emptied, breath visible, wind soft, rain light, work steady, midday comes, food again, water carried, quern turned, round and round, wool spun, pull, twist, wrap, wall patched, mud pressed, straw tucked. Evening returns, fire fed, stories told low, candle flickers, darkness thickens. Blanket pulled up, breathing slows, sleep arrives, and then silence. And if you fall asleep right here, right now, in the middle of a muddy field and a spinning spindle, that's perfect. Because this isn't a show that needs you awake. This is boring history. This is history for sleep. This is how you fall asleep to history. A slow, gentle drift through an aurora that wasn't empty. Just quiet. Just dim. Just human. So rest. Let the rain keep tapping. Let the embers glow low. Let the centuries soften into darkness. And let your mind do what the village does best. Slow down and stay still. The rain doesn't stop. It just changes its mind about how hard it wants to fall. Sometimes it's a soft tapping. Sometimes it's a steady drumming. Sometimes it pauses long enough that you start to hope the sky has moved on. And then it returns like a quiet reminder. And you can almost imagine a person in that village looking up at the thatched roof and saying, half joking, half serious, "Well, the sky's still doing its chores." Because in this world, even the weather feels like it has a routine. Now we drift into a part of the story that's both extremely boring and strangely comforting. Sleepy comfort. The kind of comfort that comes from knowing exactly what's going to happen next. We're going into the week, not a modern week with meetings and calendars. A village week with rhythms, a pulse. Days that feel different, mostly because of what you're allowed or expected to do. Work days, rest days, market days, church days, and in between the same constant background, maintaining life. So, let's walk through it slowly. Day 1, you wake, you work, field, water, fire, grain. Wool, sleep. Day 2, you wake, you work, field again, repair something, grind grain, stir pottage, sleep. Day 3, you wake, you work, maybe a small trip to the market path, maybe trading a bit of wool for salt, then back, then chores again, sleep. Day 4, you wake, you work, fence repair, wood gathering, wall patching, then sleep. Day 5, you wake, you work, same list, same loop, sleep. Day 6, you wake, you work, but you feel the day leaning toward a pause. A rest day, not a vacation, just a day when the body is allowed to breathe a little longer. Day 7, you wake slower, you wash a little if you can. You wear the better cloak if you have one. You walk to the gathering place. You listen, you pray. You stand in the same room with the same people. You feel something like community, not because you're best friends, but because you are all held together by the same weather and the same needs. Then you return, then you eat, then you rest. Then the week begins again. Now, notice how sleepy that is. No surprises, no plot twists, just the steady return of the same motions like waves. And if you're listening in bed, the rhythm may already be pulling you down. Good, let it. Now, we go into the next layer of monotony, the layer of counting, because in a village, counting is not math homework. It's survival. Counting is how you feel safe. Counting is how you plan. Counting is how you know if winter is going to be hard. So imagine someone counting firewood. They step outside, the air is wet, the woodpile is stacked. Not perfectly, but stacked. They look, they estimate, they touch logs, they count bundles. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. They sigh. Not dramatic. Just a breath that says, okay, we have this much. Then they count grain. They open a sack. The smell rises, earthy and dry. They check for dampness. They check for pests. They tie it shut again. They count sacks. 1 sack of rye, 2. 1 sack of oats, 1 sack of barley, 1 smaller sack of wheat. They do the same with salted meat, if they have it, with dried fish, with cheese, with honey. They count candles. They count candle stubs. 1, 2, 3. Then they stop and feel the weight of the year, because this is the truth. In the Dark Ages, the year is not a background. It's a test, a long, slow exam you take without knowing the score until spring arrives, and that weight can be heavy. So people develop habits to carry it. Counting is one, routine is another, prayer is another, humor is another. And sleep. Sleep is not just sleep. Sleep is recovery. Sleep is the body's way of getting ready to do it all again. So sleep matters. Now we drift into another inventory list, but this time it's an inventory of weather, because weather is the boss here. So, mist, fog, rain, drizzle, wind, cold, frost, snow, thaw, mud, sun, heat, flies, dry dust, then rain again, and each kind of weather changes the day. Rain makes roads heavy, wind makes roofs risky, heat makes work feel longer, cold makes fingers stiff, snow makes everything silent. Thaw makes everything muddy again, so the village lives inside the weather like fish inside water. And the weather is always there, always shaping, always deciding. Now, let's move toward one of the most boring, most real parts of peasant life. The body. Yes, the body. Because this era is physical. The body is always present. Hands are used. Backs are used, knees are used. And because the body is used, the body gets tired in a deep way. Not the kind of tired where your mind is buzzing, the kind of tired where your bones feel like they want to sink into the ground. So a person sits by the fire and rubs their hands. They stretch fingers, they roll shoulders, they press a sore spot in the lower back. And they don't complain dramatically. They just accept. Because if you complain too much in a world like this, you run out of breath. So you save your breath. You save your energy. You do what you must. Now, here's a small point of educational value said simply. Modern people often picture medieval peasants as weak. But peasants were strong, not gym strong, life strong, endurance strong, work every day strong. And that strength is part of what gets covered up when history talks only about kings. Because kings don't plant fields, kings don't grind grain, kings don't patch walls with mud, but peasants do. So, if you want to understand the era, you look at the hands, the backs, the repetitive motions. That's the real story. Now, we drift into the home at night again, because that's where the sleep script gets the most gentle. The light is dim, the fire is low, the candle is small, and people do quiet tasks, mending, spinning, carving. They talk softly, or they don't talk at all. And outside, the wind keeps moving, and the rain keeps tapping the roof. And if the roof holds, that's enough. Now, I want to bring back the cover-up idea, but in a slightly different way to keep the listener curious. Imagine you're a historian centuries later. You want to tell a story of progress. You want to say, look how far we've come. But to make now look bright, you need before to look dark. So you call the earlier time dark. You emphasize what's missing. You emphasize what's smaller. You emphasize what's quieter. And you ignore the richness of daily life. That's not always malicious. It's just storytelling. But it becomes a kind of cover-up anyway, because it hides the fact that people were still living full human lives. They weren't waiting to become modern. They weren't sitting in a blank void. They were busy every day. Now, let's do a slow recap for the audience, like a gentle reminder. Before, you might have thought the Dark Ages were a mysterious hole in history, a missing chapter, a cover-up. Now, you know. The mystery is mostly silence, less writing, more oral life. Less centralized power in some regions, more local survival, and the cover-up is mostly how later people chose what to remember. They remembered wars. They forgot chores. They remembered crowns. They forgot quernstones. They remembered stone castles. They forgot mud walls. But tonight, we remember the mud walls. We remember the quernstones. We remember the wool and the fire and the heavy damp air, because that's the truth of the era. Now, we move into another hypnotic loop, the two-field system again, but more dreamy. One field is planted, one field rests. The resting field looks empty, but it isn't. It's gathering strength. It's growing grasses. It's feeding animals sometimes. It's letting the soil recover. So rest is not laziness. Rest is part of survival. And if you need permission to rest, this is your permission. If even a field gets to rest, you can rest. Now, let's follow the resting field through a season. In spring, it looks muddy, then it greens. In summer, it grows thick with plants. In autumn, it dries and flattens. In winter, it goes pale under frost or snow. And then spring returns again. And the field that rested becomes the field that works. And the field that worked becomes the field that rests. A swap, a rhythm, a balance. Now, another list, because lists are the softest tool we have. A list of things you do slowly. Plow, seed, weed, harvest, grind, bake, spin, weave, mend, patch, carry, wait, sleep. Now, let's move to another place that many people forget existed in the Middle Ages. The river. Rivers are like roads, but easier. They carry goods. They carry people. They carry news. And they also carry sound. So imagine standing near a river, water moving over stones, constant, soft, no engine noise, no traffic, just water. And the water doesn't care about politics, it doesn't care about labels, it just moves. And in a way, it's the perfect symbol for this era. Life moving, slowly, steadily, no matter what later historians call it. Now, we drift back to the village again. A child runs for a moment, then slows because running is energy. A dog trots, a chicken pecks, a person carries a bucket. Another person carries a bundle of sticks. Another person bends to pick up something dropped in mud. And the day continues. No big scene, no big reveal, just the steady hum of life. Now we add a little humor again because it keeps the voice human. Imagine someone slipping in mud, catching themselves, and saying, "See, the earth tries to hug me every day." And someone else says, "It's because it knows you'd float away otherwise." Soft laughter. Then back to work. Now we'll move into a gentle night fear section, not to scare you, but to add depth. Because nights were darker, and darkness changes the mind. When there are no streetlights, no screens, no glowing city edges, the night feels bigger, the forest feels closer, the unknown feels thicker, so people lock doors. They stay near fire. They tell stories about spirits not because they're silly, but because stories help explain fear. And fear needs explanations. So yes, superstition existed, but superstition is just the brain trying to make sense of a world that doesn't give clear answers. And that, too, is human. Now, we soften again. We return to the safe sound. Fire, crackle, a low pop. Rain tapping the roof, wind rubbing straw, a quernstone turning round and round. A spindle whir, pull, twist, wrap, and you're breathing. Now we go into another long inventory list, and this time it's a list of things a village notices. A new face, a sick animal, a broken fence, a change in weather, a smaller harvest, a bigger market, a rumor, a bell ringing at an unusual time, a stranger on the road, a light in the sky, a river running high, snow coming early, spring coming late. And because the village notices these things, the village adjusts, slowly, quietly, because when you live by noticing, you learn something modern people forget. You learn to be present, not in a trendy way, in a survival way. You learn to watch, to listen, to feel, and that presence can be calming. So, if your mind is racing tonight, imagine it settling into village presence, listening to rain, feeling warmth, watching candle flame, not thinking about tomorrow's notifications, just being. Now we bring the title back again as a sleepy reminder. What was history's biggest cover-up? The Dark Ages, boring history for sleep. And the answer we keep circling is still the same. The cover-up wasn't a vault of secrets. It was the quiet erasure of ordinary life from the story of history. It was the way later voices got louder than the people who actually lived it. And tonight, we're letting those quiet voices speak again. Not loudly, softly, slowly, so you can rest. Now, we'll close this section with one more slow day walkthrough, but even simpler than before. Wake, fire, warm hands, eat, work, carry water, grind grain, spin wool, patch wall, field work, eat again, rest. Fire, story, candle, darkness, sleep. And if you drift off here, it's perfect, because the Dark Ages weren't a sprint. They were a long, slow walk. And the whole point of this channel, this kind of boring history, is to walk slowly enough that your mind stops running. So, let the rain tap, let the fire glow, let the village fade into darkness. And let your body do what it's been trying to do all along. Rest. Slowly. Softly. Completely. The candle is almost finished. Not in a dramatic way. Not with a sudden snap. It's just shorter. The flame is smaller. The light circle shrinks. The shadows get thicker. And the room becomes more and more like a soft cave of warmth, a place where the outside world can't reach you, a place where even time feels quieter. If you're still awake, don't fight it. This is the part where everything fades the way it would have faded in that village. No streetlights, no screens, no bright corners, just a slow dimming until sleep feels like the most natural thing in the world. Now, let's return one last time to the question you clicked on. What was history's biggest cover-up? You probably came in expecting something sharp. A hidden archive, a secret council, a dramatic lie, a villain with ink-stained fingers erasing centuries. But what we've found together is stranger and calmer. The cover-up wasn't a single act. It was a mood, a silence, a long stretch of ordinary life that didn't leave the kind of records modern people like to quote. It was the soft truth that millions of lives can pass without being carved into stone. And then, later, someone looks back at that quiet and calls it dark. Not because it was empty, because it was dim, candlelit, local, human-sized. Now, let's confirm your frame of reference, gently, like tucking the blanket in. Before this story, you may have believed the Dark Ages were a blank gap in history. The world stopped. Everything was ignorance and gloom. Nothing worth remembering happened. But now you know something more honest. Now you know. The world didn't stop. It slowed. Life didn't vanish. It became smaller and more local in some places. There was skill everywhere, just not always written down. The real story wasn't kings and battles for most people. It was mud and grain and wool and weather. It was repair. It was routine. It was endurance. And that's not a lesser story. That's the foundation story. Now, let's sink into the deepest calm. Because at this point in the night, your mind doesn't need more bits. It needs fewer edges. So we're going to do what the Dark Ages did best. We're going to repeat. We're going to loop. We're going to let the world become a slow inventory again. A soft catalog you can drift to. So imagine the village under winter. Snow or rain. Doesn't matter which. Both make the world quiet. The path is dark. The roofs are heavy with wet straw. Smoke rises, thin, slow. A dog circles and lies down. A chicken tucks itself away. A person closes the door and leans their back against it for a second. Just for a second. Because the cold outside is real and the warmth inside is precious. Now the home. Fire low. Embers glowing. The pot is empty or nearly empty. A bowl is set aside. A spoon is wiped with a rag on. A quernstone sits like a silent moon on the floor. A spindle rests. A cloak hangs from a peg. The wall shows patches of fresh daub drying slowly. Mud, straw, patched cracks, less wind. And the soundscape wraps around everything like wool. Wind outside, rain on thatch, fire crackling softly. A slow breath, a long exhale. Now, let's list again, slowly, like a lullaby. Rye. Oats, barley, wheat, bread, pottage, salt, water, smoke, ash, wood, straw, mud, wool, linen, leather, rope, pot, bowl, spoon, quern, stone, spindle, thread, needle, cloak, boots, oxen, plow, field, row, furrow, seed, rain, wind, fog, fire, embers, a leap, and as the list repeats in your mind, you can feel the modern world getting farther away. The notifications, the bright screens, the busy noise, they fade like a dream you don't need. Now, we come to the final truth of this bait and switch. We came in with mystery. We end with monotony. We began with the unsettling dark, and we finish with the comforting dark. Because not all darkness is frightening. Some darkness is rest. Some darkness is safety. Some darkness is permission. Permission to stop. Permission to let your mind unclench. Permission to be quiet. So maybe that's the real reason the term Dark Ages sticks in the imagination. Not because it's accurate, because it's emotional. It describes how it feels to live without modern light, to live by candle, to live by fire, to live by day and night. And in that world, people slept differently. They didn't scroll, they didn't chase, they didn't argue online, they listened to wind, they listened to rain, they watched the flame shrink. And they let sleep arrive like it belonged there. Now, one last gentle scene. A person lies down on straw. Their body is tired in a simple way, a work-tired way. Their hands are rough. Their shoulders ache. But the ache is honest. It's not the ache of mental racing. It's the ache of a day that was used up. They pull a wool blanket up. The fire is low. The candle has nearly burned down. The room is warm near the embers and cold near the door. They turn slightly, finding the best pocket of warmth. Their breathing slows, in, out, outside. Rain taps softly on the roof, and the village falls into the same quiet it falls into every night. Not because the village is dead, because the village is resting, and the world is simply taking a breath. Now we finish the story the way we promised we would. We return to the cover-up idea gently. So perhaps the cover-up wasn't about hiding secrets. Perhaps the cover-up was just rest. A long stretch of history where the spotlight dimmed, where the loud parts of empire faded, where ordinary people lived ordinary lives without leaving many written footprints. And now, you can rest too. You can let the modern world dim. You can let your thoughts slow down. You can let your body do what it's been asking for. Now, here's your ending. Soft, clear, and simple. If you're still awake, you don't have to be. You can close your eyes now. You can listen to the last little sounds, the rain, the wind, the fire, and you can drift. And if you enjoyed this, if your mind feels even a little quieter, subscribe to Transcendent History, because I'll be here every week with more history for sleep. More boring history that helps you fall asleep to history. More bedtime stories for adults, calm, slow, and human. And if you know someone who struggles to turn their brain off at night, share this video with them. It might be the calm they've been looking for. And before you go, leave a comment with one word, just one. Quiet. So I know you made it this far. So I know you're here with me in the candlelight. Now, let the screen fade. Let the sound soften. Let the darkness become gentle. And let your body take the same old honest path humans have taken for centuries. From warmth to stillness to sleep.